Let's face it, airports can be pretty annoying. But the most annoying thing about them is probably having to take the laptop out of your backpack and put it in a separate bin while going through the security check. But, of course, they wouldn't make us do those extra moves if there wasn't a good reason for it. Laptops are dense, and X-rays can't penetrate them, so it's easy to hide something dangerous there. If the device is out and on its own in a separate bin, it's easier for the scanners to capture something dangerous. Most airplanes are white. Is there a benefit to choosing this exact color? No, white paint doesn't make a place feel lighter. Neither does it save money on painting. Here are the actual reasons for the choice: safety, efficiency, and comfort. The first airplanes had a metallic color, but the problem with metal is that it's prone to corrosion, so painting it is a great way to protect an airplane from corrosion. White is favored for several reasons. First, planes fly high above the clouds and are exposed to sunlight a lot. White is the color that absorbs the least heat, and white planes get heated less. Also, sunlight makes the paint fade away. A colorful airplane will have its paint fade very fast and will require repainting. And repainting is costly, so painting aircraft white is a more lasting choice. Also, any damage is more easily noticed on a white surface. So that's one more point for the white color. We always board from the left side of the plane, every single time, no exceptions. For some reason, the right side just doesn't seem to be an option. Yes, that's done on purpose. First, the captain usually sits on the left. This way, it's easier for the pilot to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge. Also, aircraft are fueled and loaded with baggage on the right side. Since people board the plane from the left, the crew can do their job undisturbed, and there's no danger to passengers. Consistency with the choice of a side helps to make everything work more effectively. Since everyone always enters from the left, all jet bridges are designed to get attached to the left side of the airplane. If every airplane had the freedom to choose the side, it would create an additional mess for the logistics behind the process. There are more questions popping up, like what does this black triangle drawn above one of the windows mean? Apparently, it marks the seat from which the view of the airplane's wing is the best. It's needed for the crew to find the spot as fast as possible if, in case of an emergency, they need to inspect the engines, slats, or flaps. This mark saves a lot of time. Next, the rows aren't well aligned with the windows. This is business. Originally, all planes are designed with rows and windows lining up perfectly. But when an airline buys a jet, they add some additional seats, squeezing them closer together. This way, they have more seats, which means more passengers, so they can sell more tickets. But you get less space for your legs and might miss out on a window. Also, all windows have rounded corners, and this is done for safety reasons. There used to be planes with squared windows, but those caused crashes because such windows couldn't withstand high-altitude pressures. At high altitudes, external atmospheric pressure is lower than the pressure inside the cabin. So, there's a big difference in pressure inside and outside the airplane, and this creates stress. Without windows, this stress flows smoothly through the material. A squared window becomes an obstacle, and the flow of stress needs to change direction. The pressure builds up in the corners, leading to cracks. As a result, such windows break. Oval windows allow the stress to flow more smoothly without disrupting them too much and preventing stress concentration. So, oval windows are safer. The glass used in production is stretched acrylic glass, and there are 3 separate panes of it. This is done as a security measure in case there is a breach. This way, at least one pane will remain intact at all times. Have you ever noticed those small holes in the windows? The tiny hole is actually only in the pane that's in the middle. Its task is to regulate the huge pressure difference inside and outside the cabin. This way, the outer pane can handle the load. If the outer pane breaks, the middle one, even though there's a hole in it, will be able to keep the window intact. Also, that hole prevents the windows from fogging up. Now, let's say you want to relax and watch a movie. Luckily, there's a pair of headphones, but they're weird. They have a 2-pronged plug. No, this is not some kind of advanced technology. This is a witty move to prevent theft. If you can't use them anywhere else but on the airplane, no one will have the urge to snatch them away. Outside the airplane, they're basically useless. And then they bring food. There are people who love airplane food and people who aren't very fond of it. But most will agree that food does taste different in the air. Turns out, it's actually a thing. Low air pressure, lack of humidity, and background noise that we have at high altitudes change the functioning of our taste buds. They become less sensitive to sweet and salty foods, so airlines have to use more seasoning. Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone opened an airplane door accidentally? This wouldn't end well. It would be very dangerous to say the least. More specifically, soon there would be a lack of oxygen in the cabin. But gladly, no one can open that door accidentally. The pressure difference between inside and outside makes it almost impossible. It would take some immense strength to open it. The doors are designed to open on their own in case of an emergency. Speaking of safety, during takeoff and landing, the crew dims the light in the cabin. This is done for a good reason. This way, in case of emergency, you will see everything more clearly. Your eyes will get used to the darkness, and you'll have an easier time evacuating. Now, about pilots. They always wear those cool sunglasses, but the purpose is not to look cooler. They're used to protect the eyes. Throughout their career, pilots have to take care of their vision, but the problem is that it's not an easy task when you're a pilot. The damaging solar radiation that our sun emits is filtered out by the Earth's atmosphere, so the sunlight isn't very damaging to you if you spend most of your time on the ground. But it's different up in the sky. There's less air there, and the brightness is way higher. And with every 1,000 feet of elevation, the solar radiation is around 5% stronger. On average, aircraft fly at an altitude of 35,000 feet. This means that the amount of UV radiation is 175% greater than on the ground. This is very damaging to any person's vision. The large amount of time pilots spend in the air makes them vulnerable to different eye problems. And having eye problems can cost a pilot their career. So, wearing sunglasses is a crucial thing for them, and these sunglasses must be of the best quality. They should minimize the impact of sunlight and withstand UV rays, providing 100% protection for the eyes. Also, they can't be polarized, since polarization can mess with the perception of the cockpit displays. They should provide the best clarity, decrease eye fatigue, and minimize color deformation, so that pilots can see just like they would without their sunglasses on.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Who doesn't want to cut down on flight tickets when they're planning a trip? Here are some useful tips on how to get the best deals. Some cities like London and New York have more than one airport, so consider flying through alternate airports. Some of these airports are too far away from the city center. That's why tickets will be cheaper on the flights that land there. I tried this one myself. Well, I landed at a place that looked like a cargo airport, but hey, there was a bus from there to the city center. Pros, the ticket was cheap. Cons, I spent an extra hour on the road to get to the center. What's the prime day to book a ticket? That's a heated debate. Apparently, Tuesdays are better for booking a flight. More specifically, ticket fees at around 1:30 p.m. can be the cheapest. So, if you have plans to buy tickets for your dream vacation, go for a hunt on this specific day and time. There are great websites where you can compare flights and catch the cheapest ones, and I'll get to them soon. But don't ignore the official airline websites. Many of them announce private sales for those loyal customers who directly visit their pages. If your agenda allows you to play with your departure time, do that. Traveling on an early-hour flight generally equals paying less for tickets. To catch a 6 a.m. flight, you have to get up when most of the people in the city are still enjoying their comfy beds. In the early hours, you might have problems with how to get to the airport. Not all public transport works 24 hours. Another problem would be your cat accidentally turning off your alarm. This is why these flights generally come cheaper. The same principle applies to late-night flights too. People generally don't want to fly after midnight, so prices drop accordingly. Look at the bright side. You have more time to wander around once you get to your destination. Flying with a connection is another way. It's a fairly cheap option, especially on longer haul flights. This method has a downside. Your plans can be changed with one word: delay. You might have to say goodbye to your connecting flight. Another thing you can do with connecting flights is to search for flights from the same country. Tourist destinations, megacities, and capitals are generally more expensive. Travel to a smaller city and then depart to your destination. Many of us love cookies, but probably not the ones in our browsers. Staying incognito in the flight searching process will help you get cheaper flights. How? Ticket prices depend on demand, so companies use the data on how many people search for which tickets. Let's say you look for tickets to London and regularly check the airline website to get a good deal. Your data signals that you have shown an interest in particular dates and a location. That's how you see that same flight suddenly gets more expensive. The airline knows that you're likely going to buy it. This can happen even if you refresh your browser. Either stay unidentified or clear your cookies to take yourself out of this situation. Remember I recommended that you visit the airline websites directly? You can also sign up for alerts on price drops. If you think notifications are annoying, even though they are useful, you can follow airlines on socials. Many companies use their social media accounts effectively, and they sometimes give customers some last-minute deals. In some cases, it's convenient to book tickets over the phone. For example, if you're in a group. Be aware though that some airlines add extra fees for completing a booking via a call. It can be as much as $50. You could get a day trip on your vacation with that money instead of spending it on words. If you must complete a booking by call, simply ask the person if they're going to charge you some additional fees for calling. While searching for a ticket, you can pretend you're in a different location. The best option is to change your location to the country you'll visit or the airline's home country. Let's say you'll go to Japan. Booking from the airline's website and changing your location via VPN would be the key to seeing lower prices. I said that I'd get to the flight comparison sites topic, and here I am. These websites are gems for giving you the best fares from several airlines and options. They recommend alternative routes that you haven't considered. Yet again, before clicking the confirm button, take a few seconds to check the airline's website. Booking directly and cutting out the middleman's fee can be a wiser option. The other potential benefit is reliable customer service. With some airlines, booking via a third party will turn this process into a tangled headphone cable like there's no tomorrow. I'll share a strategy for getting an entire row for yourselves. Imagine you're traveling with your BFF. One of you should book the window seat and the other one book the aisle seat. Other passengers will likely go for other seats and avoid the middle seat. This method cannot always work though. If the plane is fully occupied, there'll be some unlucky person in between you. If someone books that middle seat, you can always offer them the aisle or window seat and continue to sit with your BFF. The second option is booking seats in the 13th row. Well, 13 doesn't have a good reputation as it is superstitiously considered unlucky. Chances are, no one else books a seat from this particular number. This one is a gift to you for all your efforts to get the best possible deal. Good job you're in the airport. You're watching your favorite show while waiting for the gate to open. Boom! An hour of free airport Wi-Fi is over. Here's a loophole to double it. Roll back the time on your device. When you change the time zone back an hour, the system won't understand it and it'll allow you to use it for another hour. My 14th point is about safety. Did you know that you shouldn't swap seats before the plane takes off without letting the flight attendant know? This rule applies to changing your seat with a person from a different row, not to the person next to you. This can cause the plane to make an emergency landing. The reason is related to weight and how it's distributed. Every plane has a takeoff weight limit. This number comprises things like fuel, luggage, and passengers. Flight attendants look out for the potential weight distribution. A pilot explains it like this. If you move some seats without asking them, you might cause an imbalance on the plane. If you ask the flight attendants if you want to change seats, they'll let you do it after takeoff. I mean, people get up and move in the plane all the time, so this isn't like you can't change your position at all, but it can be dangerous to do so without confirmation. Here's a fun fact: the black box, as its nickname, is not black, it's bright orange. Flight Data Recorder is its official name, and it's orange so that in case of an accident, the rescue team can spot it easily. Where do you think is the dirtiest place on the aircraft? Not toilets, not seat holders, it's table trays. There are more. The cozy blankets you ask for from the flight attendants aren't so clean either. According to a report, some airlines wash their blankets only once a month. Now that you know the tricks, you can plan your trip at a perfect price and maybe bring your own blanket to the plane. Sit back and enjoy the flight. Good things come to those who wait.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Are the letters SSSS on your boarding pass a reason to worry? What's much more dangerous than turbulence? Should you really be the first to board the plane? You're about to figure it out. You might have noticed that most planes have blue seats. There's no mystery here. Airlines opt for this color because it's considered to have a calming effect. This color supposedly puts passengers at ease and helps even the most nervous flyers to relax. But there's also another, more practical reason. Stains, dirt, and scrapes are less visible on dark blue fabric. Never throw your boarding pass away in a public place. It contains tons of your sensitive information, including your name and frequent flyer number. This, in turn, may allow someone else to check your future bookings, change your seat, or even cancel your flights. So the best way to deal with the boarding pass for a flight you've already boarded is to take it home and feed it through a paper shredder. By the way, if you ever see the letters SSSS or S on your boarding pass, get ready for additional security checks. Instead of these letters, there may be a checkerboard pattern. Anyway, if you have any of these marks, your carry-on luggage can also undergo a thorough inspection. Why might they choose you for secondary screening? Some of the criteria are making a one-way reservation or paying cash for your ticket. In some cases, the selection is absolutely random. Look, your gate is open and the boarding has started. Wait, where are you running? There's no need to hurry. The trick experienced Globetrotters use is always board last. For one thing, you don't have to waste time standing in line. Then, there are fewer people on the jetway and in the aisle, and you spend less time on the plane. No one is going to take your seat anyway. There's one exception though. If you have a bulky carry-on bag, it may make more sense not to board last. Otherwise, the chances are high that all the overhead bin space will be occupied by the time you reach your seat. And then your bag may end up in another part of the plane, and you'll have to wait till the other passengers disembark before you get to your luggage. Duh! Before takeoff and landing, flight attendants usually flip a small switch on the bathroom door. This prevents it from flying open when it's not supposed to. With the same ease, a flight attendant can open the door when someone is inside. Look, they only need to lift the lavatory sign and move the knob into the unlocked position. Pilots don't worry about turbulence. That's because they know that there is a thing way more dangerous than any turbulence. It's an updraft. In most cases, turbulence only drops you a couple of feet down, even though it might feel as if you're falling from the top of the Empire State Building. If the turbulence is strong enough for the pilots to ask flight attendants to sit down, the plane can go 10 to 20 feet down. The most extreme white-knuckle turbulence is super rare. But an updraft is a big air mass, part of a storm or some other weather phenomenon, moving upwards. Pilots don't see updrafts on their radars at night, and when a plane hits one, it feels like driving over a huge speed bump at 500 miles per hour. An updraft is also extremely treacherous because it can push an aircraft upward to dangerous altitudes. Modern planes have a special system that detects other aircraft, mountains, and different solid objects in their path. 10 miles away from another plane, and a voice in the cockpit starts chanting, "Traffic, traffic." 5 miles closer, and the same voice begins to give pilots the directions. Airplanes can operate with one engine, even during takeoff and landing. Both engines failing simultaneously is almost unheard of, but even then, a plane wouldn't drop from the sky like a rock. Pilots would have up to 20 minutes to find a suitable place to land. The way the cabin is pressurized has a great effect on your taste buds. You lose up to 30% of your ability to taste sweet and salty things. In other words, it's not that airplane food isn't tasty, you just don't feel its flavor. That's also the main reason why airline catering companies add extra salt and spices to the dishes they cook. But you know what may help you? Noise-canceling earphones. For some reason, that probably has a scientific explanation. Cutting off all that noise around can help your taste buds. Each of those dings you hear during the flight has its own meaning. In most airlines, a boing soon after takeoff indicates that the landing gear is getting retracted. 3 dings in a row means more urgency than just one. A high-low ringtone informs crew members that their colleague needs them in another part of the plane. 3 low chimes means some serious turbulence ahead. Crew members are supposed to put away meal carts, take their seats, and fasten their seatbelts. If you're a nervous flyer, pick a seat in the middle of the cabin. Turbulence mostly affects the front and rear parts of the cabin. The middle section, which is over the wings, doesn't shake so much. Pilots and co-pilots eat different meals. The reason for this precaution is very simple. Imagine both pilots having the same dish and getting food poisoning. In this case, neither of them will be able to control the plane. If they still want to have the same dish and won't agree to have anything else, there's a safety net. Pilots don't have their meals at the same time. If one pilot ate the dish and still feels okay several hours later, the other pilot can brave their meal as well. What would you say when asked about the filthiest place on a plane? Nope, that's not the toilet seat. It's not even in the bathroom. Flight attendants warn that you should be particularly careful with headrests, seat pockets, tray tables, and seat belts. Experiments have shown that 1/3 of all seat belts have yeast and mold on them. Most tray tables are covered with bacteria. Seat pockets are extremely filthy too, but headrests are the dirtiest of them all. In most cases, flight attendants don't have enough time to change or disinfect them in between flights. If your captain announces they're finishing some paperwork, it means they're busy revising the flight itinerary or waiting for the ground staff to prepare the flight logbook. That's a journal that contains the official record of a journey. Some places, especially those flying long distances, have secret bedrooms for crew members to catch some shut-eye. These bedrooms, called crew rest compartments, are located either at the back of the plane or behind the cockpit. Such a compartment can have up to 10 comfortable beds where flight attendants can have a rest. Plane windows are made of super strong plexiglass that can easily cope with high speeds. And the window panes are shaped in a special way so that the high pressure inside the cabin pushes them against the aircraft body. In other words, plane windows are very unlikely to get broken. Once upon a time, plane windows were square, but the pressure built up in the corners of such windows, making them ultimate weak spots. This means that each square window had 4 weak spots. This made them likely to crash under the enormous stress of high altitudes. Luckily, making airplane windows curved solved this problem once and forever. Such a shape distributes the pressure and reduces the likelihood of cracks or any other damage. Planes regularly get struck by lightning, at least once a year or once per 1,000 hours of flight time. These days, it's totally safe. The electric charge simply runs through the aircraft's aluminum shell. It doesn't cause the plane any damage. But did you know that airplanes not only get hit by lightning, but they also trigger it? When an aircraft is flying through a cloud, the friction between its fuselage and the air creates static electricity. Sometimes it can cause lightning.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side. Now, flying has long become routine for many people. But even frequent flyers sometimes don't know about things you should never do on a plane. Ooh. No bare feet on a plane. It's one of the biggest no-nos of air travel. Even if we omit the topic of unpleasant odors. The airplane floor is extremely filthy. People with contagious foot problems might have been walking the aisles barefoot before you. There's likely to be a lot of dirt left after previous passengers. And don't even get me started on the floor in the lavatories. Ew. If your feet need some freedom, take off your shoes, but at least wear your socks, or bring along a pair of light slippers. Keep in mind that the pressurized air in the passenger cabin is just as dry as it is in the Sahara Desert, with only about 20% humidity. That's why your skin may feel discomfort after a flight. But wouldn't it make more sense to install several humidifiers that could add some moisture? But this extra load would cost airlines lots of money. Plus, the plane's airframe is mostly made of aluminum and other metals, and humid air could lead to corrosion. So, don't forget to bring a moisturizer and use it during the flight. Always secure your tray table as soon as the plane starts moving on the tarmac, and never lower it during the takeoff and landing. It's a security measure, which ensures that you and the other passengers will have a clear pathway in case of an emergency evacuation. Also, keep your seat in an upright position during takeoff and landing. First of all, a reclined seat can seriously slow down an emergency evacuation, since it will block a person sitting behind. What's more, the more backward you're leaning, the harder it is to get into the brace position during an emergency landing. Now, try to avoid snoozing during or right after takeoff and landing. For one thing, it's not the best thing for your health. The main problem is that the air pressure inside the cabin changes very quickly during these phases of the flight. This, in turn, affects the air pressure in your ears. It's important to be alert during this time to relax and open up your ears, for example by yawning or swallowing frequency. Chewing gum works for me. If you're sleeping, you can't do this, which can lead to permanent damage. And of course, there's a safety issue. Most accidents happen during takeoff and landing. If you're sleeping during these stages, you might not be alert and conscious enough if an emergency happens. Now, this next recommendation comes from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. According to them, you might want to skip on hot drinks on a plane. The water used to make tea or coffee doesn't come from bottles, it's regular tap water. And water tanks on airplanes are often old and full of bacteria. In 2004, there was a study which found that more than 12% of water samples contained harmful bacteria. But if you still decide to have a cup of hot beverage on a plane, never pour coffee or tea on your own. Flight attendants are trained to handle this task in crowded aisles of a moving airplane and won't accidentally burn you or other passengers. Now, it's probably better if you don't order Coke on a plane. The cabin pressure, so low up in the air, causes a lot of foam. For apparent reasons, flight attendants don't want to serve you a cup filled with froth. That's why they'll fill only half the cup, then wait for the bubbles to settle, and then finish pouring. That can take ages. Keep your air vent open. This way you'll minimize the spread of germs. Planes have high-quality air filters. They'll catch up to 99% of all airborne germs, so you should be safe there. But make sure to wipe that tray table. With 8 times more bacteria than the toilet flush button, it's the dirtiest place on board. Another thing you should avoid is leaning your head on the window if you have a window seat. You never know who occupied your seat before you, and, in any case, the glass is likely to be covered with germs. Say no to backless sandals and high heels on a flight. I do. There are very serious safety reasons for such a request. The first is that both these types of footwear make it very difficult to evacuate the aircraft fast. If you wear high heels, you will anyway have to leave them behind in case the crew is using emergency slides during an evacuation. The heels are very likely to damage the slide, so off they go. Now ask yourself, do you really fancy running away from the airplane barefoot? I'll answer that for you. Nope. Instead, wear sturdy shoes with a solid sole. In this case, you won't find yourself standing on the hot tarmac or in the weeds without any footwear at all. Don't stuff heavy objects into overhead compartments. Your things may not stay inside during severe turbulence, and while falling out, they will injure you and other passengers. Ow! That's why, if it feels difficult to lift something into the overhead compartment, better put it under the seat in front of you or elsewhere. Now, don't blame the pilots for the hard landing. When you experience it in bad weather, it might be intentional. If the runway is covered with water or snow, the plane has to touch down hard in order to break the water layer and prevent aquaplaning. Otherwise, the water can perform the role of a lubricant, and the plane won't be able to brake or respond to any control. Deploying an emergency slide when there's no emergency is a very bad idea. It can cause hour-long delays and cost airlines thousands of dollars to pack the undamaged slide back into its container. Why would someone do it? Apparently, some think it'll help them get off the plane faster. Well, they're an idiot. Don't be one yourself. Just keep in mind that it doesn't work this way. Don't ignore the instructions of the cabin crew to open window shades during takeoff and landing. This way, flight attendants can see what's happening outside, assess the situation, and act fast, organizing the evacuation. For example, if there's a fire outside one exit, they will redirect passengers toward another door. Avoid carrying spray deodorants or shaving cream in your carry-on baggage. Both these things tend to explode mid-flight and therefore aren't allowed on board the airplane. A much better idea is to choose stick deodorants. You also mustn't keep power banks in your checked luggage, and if you want to bring one on board, its capacity shouldn't be more than 20,000 milliamps. Besides, you shouldn't use them during the flight since they might catch fire. In general, lithium batteries are safe to use, but since they're high energy, they can catch fire if they're not treated with care, misused, or if there's a manufacturing fault. Such batteries have been the cause of quite a few fires on board airplanes, as well as during ground handling. Do not worry about airport scanners, they won't harm your health. Otherwise, airport employees wouldn't be able to stay near them without special clothing. Even when you're passing by a baggage scanner, the risk is minimal. And the last one, don't act like a jerk on board. Behave yourself. I know you will. Also, never try to land a plane on your own. Nah, don't laugh, I'm not kidding. In movies, they often show us that something happens to the pilots and they can't land the plane. And that's when the main character, a very skillful person, starts their game. Unfortunately, it's close to impossible to do it in real life, even if a person is a genius, is fond of computer simulators that match the real model of an aircraft 100%, and is ready to follow all the instructions from the ground. They're likely to fail due to one simple aspect: stress. It is true that there have been cases throughout history when amateurs landed smallish private planes after the incapacitation of a pilot. However, there has never been a case of a non-professional pilot landing a commercial passenger airplane. It's only in the movies. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Seat pockets on planes are mostly filled with in-flight magazines, a plane safety guide, and information about the airline. But they're also home to all sorts of trash, grime, and bacteria that just don't belong there. A passenger coughs into a tissue or wipes their runny nose with a handful of them, but instead of immediately getting rid of them, it gets placed into the seat back pocket. Now another passenger comes along on the very next flight, sitting in that same exact seat. With limited space around them, putting some of their belongings into the pockets leads to potentially millions of germs spreading significantly to them. It's no wonder that these seats' back pockets can get so nasty. Everybody puts their trash inside of them. Passengers often leave uneaten candy bars, diapers, apple cores, and nuts. This leaves crumbs and other matters everywhere. All of this trash is taken out before the next flight, but they're rarely ever deeply cleaned. It's all dependent on the airline itself as to how often they'll really clean the plane and wipe everything down properly. The plastic tray tables where we eat and place our things are one of, if not, the dirtiest parts of any airplane. These seatback tray tables that we use can have over 2,000 CFUs, colony-forming units of bacteria, per square inch living on their surface. The ridged texture keeps cups of soda from sliding off the table, also creating tiny mountain ranges where the microbes attach themselves. Sugary sodas and juices that spill onto tray tables throughout flights give bacteria the perfect environment to stay and feed. Bacteria love living on this plastic almost as much as human skin. And there are lots of microbes that your tray catches and holds onto, especially when they're not thoroughly cleaned. Much like air vents that are always fiddled with, seatbelt buckles are probably the most touched thing on any aircraft. The average buckle can contain nearly 1,000 colony-forming units of bacteria per square inch on it at all times. Passengers touch seatbelt buckles to go to the bathroom. Even after washing their hands, people will walk down the aisle touching all the headrests for balance to get to their seat. After settling in and buckling up, most will then touch their face, eyes, phone, and even food for the rest of the trip. Airports can be big virus spreaders, but they're cleaned constantly. The same cannot be said for the subway, buses, or even taxis. Subway door handles, luggage carts, chairs, seats, and poles are very rarely cleaned and are a breeding ground for all sorts of nasties. New York City's subway system is one of the dirtiest in the world, with a mind-boggling 2 million bacteria colonies per square inch on nearly every surface. Many of these have still yet to be identified. They're that rare. It goes with you everywhere, sometimes even into the bathroom. As a result, cell phones could be up to 10 times dirtier than any toilet seat. E. coli, the bacteria that can give stomach cramps and fevers, can live for hours on warm surfaces like phones. The best solution? Wash your hands thoroughly before touching phones, and make sure that phone gets a good wipe down with a disinfectant. Most people have a smartphone by them day and night, meaning that all the bacteria picked up during the day is transferred to them. Everyone touches the remote control at some point, but it isn't even thought of when cleaning the house. It falls to the floor or gets into the side of the sofa, a warm, dark home for mold and bacteria, where there are lots of crumbs and grime. A good clean with an antibacterial wipe every so often will help keep it shiny and germ-free. Blowing out candles on a birthday cake can expel a mist of saliva that always lands on the birthday cake frosting. This can lead to some very unhappy birthday parties if someone is sick. Sometimes it's better to skip the candles altogether, or accept the risk that every day is someone's birthday celebration, and a little bit of spit won't always hurt you. A single ATM gets touched by hundreds of people in a day. The chances that at least one of those people touching the buttons is sick and freely spreading the flu or cold is naturally quite high then. The flu, for example, can live up to 2 days on objects. It can even be days after someone has recovered from that virus that it'd still be active and spreadable. ATMs are cleaned, but not all the time. It would be impossible to service every single one in a major city daily. A single dollar bill can be home to thousands of different kinds of bacteria, including the usual suspects like E. coli, staph, and a bacterium that causes acne breakouts. Paper money can reportedly carry more germs than a household toilet, and bills are a hospitable environment for gross microbes. The smaller in value of the bill, the dirtier it will be because it's in circulation more. Money can't be cleaned like a lot of things, but taking it to a bank for new, hopefully cleaner bills is possible. Use hand sanitizer and wash your hands after handling money too, just in case. Grocery store shopping carts can have more bacteria on them than what's ever been found in public restrooms. That includes toilet seats and the flushing handles. Cleansing wipe dispensers have been appearing at many major grocery chains, and some stores even go the extra mile to clean them after the day's through. But these simply aren't enough to keep up with the petri dish that the handles are. With over 100,000 bacteria per square inch, it's nearly impossible to keep them clean. Toothbrush holders hold onto moisture and are rarely cleaned, making them one of the dirtiest things in our homes. It can be filled with salmonella, E. coli, and lots of mold over time when it's not getting cleaned regularly. Wash your toothbrush holder in hot, soapy water every week to minimize the chances of getting sick. Toothbrushes should be changed every 3 to 4 months for a very good reason. It takes a while for the toothbrush to dry. This creates the perfect home for mold and fungus to spread and grow. There can be more than 600 different kinds of bacteria living inside of your mouth. A kiss alone can transfer about 80 million bacteria from one mouth to another. A good brushing routine will have around 1,000 to 100,000 bacteria living on each tooth's surface. But for those that don't brush, bacteria can be up to 100 million or 1 billion bacteria on each tooth. The dirtiest thing in our home can only be one thing: the kitchen sponge. It's wet, absorbent, and food and dirt are rubbed into it all the time. Then we wipe down our kitchen tops just to spread all that grubbiness around some more. Sponges are very hard to keep clean. The best way to keep things sanitary is to replace it when it starts to smell bad. It's no surprise that if the sponges are filthy, then sinks are too. Rinsed fruit, vegetables, prepared raw meat, and dishes needing cleaning all make their way to the kitchen sink. This creates an extremely high breeding ground for E. coli, salmonella, and many other gross things. They'll stick to the sides and drain holes and grow like crazy. Clean sinks before and after each use, and make sure to keep them as dry as possible to prevent any mold growth as well. Restaurant menus and condiment dispensers aren't cleaned nearly as often as they should be. If someone with a cold was using the condiments right before you, this greatly increases the chance of the cold-causing bacteria being on your hands and then your fries. Menus are rarely washed with disinfectants after each use. Customers have been touching quite a few things like chairs, tables, their faces, or hair before they give the menus back. Dog toys need to be cleaned regularly to prevent any bacteria or mold growth from spreading too much. Each time a dog slobbers on a toy, they don't just transfer their mouth bacteria. They've created a sticky, wet place for other germs to live on. There's no way of telling just what their favorite plaything has picked up around the house or yard. Purses and bags could have more bacteria than we really considered. They're regularly placed on dirty floors, bathroom floors, countertops, and out on the street. This exposes them to all sorts of germs, like salmonella, E. coli, mold, and fungus, all the time. Alcohol wipes are very good to carry around in your purse or bag to give them a good wipe down when needed. Drinking fountains are a cesspool of bacteria and germs. Over 2 million bacteria per square inch can be found on the fountain's faucets alone. As they get wet and touched by hundreds of hands, the bacteria and mold begin to grow. If someone has coughed or sneezed near it recently, those particles will cling onto the water. This creates a higher chance of the next person drinking from it catching something.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
You unbuckle your seatbelt and stand up, stretching your legs after a long flight. You head towards the restroom and think about freshening up. Suddenly, you're in the air. Luggage flies around you. It feels like the world is ending. You're 30,000 feet above the ground, and you're heading for a crash landing. Before you have any more time to think, everything goes black. In early 2001, a massive Boeing 747 carrying over 400 people took off from Tokyo Haneda International Airport. The flight progressed like normal until it reached 39,000 feet and coasting speed. Food was being served, and passengers were up and about like they would be on any other journey. Slightly earlier in the day, a Japanese airline flight between Busan, South Korea, and Tokyo, Japan, had begun in a similar fashion. This one was smaller, with about 250 people on board. It had also started coasting at around 37,000 feet. Both of these planes were on a similar flight path, only 2,000 feet apart, and due to meet over the Japanese island of Honshu. They were both close to this intersection when the pilot of the Boeing 747 noticed his anti-collision indicator going off. This was when he first knew something was wrong. One of the critical aspects of modern air travel is the coordination of air traffic control. Every flight is monitored, and pilots are advised if anything goes wrong. The entire point of air traffic control is to organize flights so well that collisions are impossible. Every modern plane is built with collision monitors, but they are never supposed to be used because of this. While the anti-collision indicators buzzed, 26-year-old trainee Hideki Hachitani was sitting behind the radars at the control tower, monitoring both flights. The stress of having to oversee more than 10 planes was overwhelming him. This isn't surprising, given that he wasn't even certified to operate by himself without supervision. When he noticed the potential collision, he rushed to prevent a disaster. He quickly contacted the flight from Busan that was cruising at 37,000 feet and told them to dip lower, trying to create a bigger gap between the planes. In his rush, though, Hachitani had made a terrible mistake. He had contacted the wrong plane. Instead of telling the Boeing 747 to reduce its altitude, the pilot of the other plane followed Hachitani's instructions and lowered from 39,000 feet to 37,000 feet, the exact same height as the 747. Both planes sped toward each other at 500 miles per hour on a collision course. Hachitani was beginning to panic now. When he noticed that the flight from Busan hadn't descended, he quickly instructed it to turn right. The pilot had, of course, failed to follow the instructions given because they'd been sent to the wrong plane. For an unknown reason, the instruction to turn right failed to reach anyone at all this time. The communications from air traffic control were failing, and the pilots didn't have any idea of how much danger they were in. When seeing Hachitani panicking behind the control panel, his supervisor rushed to the scene and took control of the situation. She contacted the flight from Busan and now told it to climb up. Amazingly, when she did this, she gave the order to a flight that wasn't even operating that day. Both of the flights ignored her because they didn't know that the message was intended for them. The Boeing pilot was at least aware that there was another plane close by, but his faith in air traffic control would have comforted him. Surely, if anything was badly wrong, someone would send him more instructions? At this point, the crash was beginning to look inevitable. For the passengers on the flights, though, everything would have seemed to be normal. They might have been eating some snacks, stretching their legs, or maybe waiting in line for the toilet, completely unaware that they were on course to fly straight into another plane. Luckily for all of the 600-plus people involved, the pilot was well-trained and confident in a situation that would cause most people to freeze up. Through his windscreen, he saw something that no pilot should ever see: another plane heading directly for him. With cat-like reflexes and remarkable composure, the Boeing pilot gripped the throttle and steered the plane down as low as he could for the seconds he had before the collision. The Boeing flew straight underneath the other flight. Imagine being a pilot and seeing the ground in front of you instead of the sky. They both made it out intact. This man had saved the lives of more than 600 people. That isn't to say that everyone got out without a scratch. The passengers were completely unaware of the entire incident, so barely any were buckled in. They were powerless as the change in direction threw them against the inside of the plane. Out of nowhere, with the plane's sudden movement, many hit the roof with the force of a car crash. Every unsecured object and person were thrown through the air. Some might have even felt like the plane had just hit the ground. Miraculously, only 7 passengers and 2 crew members were seriously injured, and the rest only received minor injuries. The pilot circled back to Tokyo to allow all of the injuries to be treated. Thanks to the quick response of medical teams and unbelievable decision-making and skill shown by the pilot, everyone on the flight survived. Every time you travel on a plane, you're signing up to shoot through the sky at speeds of up to 500 miles per hour in a fragile metal shell. You're surrounded by enormous, dangerous motors, 6 or 7 miles above the ground. Surely there's no way you'd survive if the plane itself started to fail. The Hudson Bay landing shows that skilled pilots can overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. On January 15, 2009, Flight 1549 was set to fly from New York to North Carolina. The pilot, Chesley Sullenberger, was a former jet pilot who converted to commercial flights in the 1980s. The sky was clear and the conditions were favorable. It was a typical flight for all of the 155 passengers on board, until the worst happened just a minute and a half in. As the plane climbed to 3,000 feet, they hit a flock of Canada geese. They hit the entire plane, but most importantly, some geese got caught in both engines. When Sullenberger realized that his engines were failing, he contacted air traffic control. They ordered him to land back at the airport, but he realized that it was impossible. With failing engines and no clear runway to land on, he had to take control of the situation to save the lives of everyone on board. Without full control of his plane, he wasn't able to operate at the normal altitude. He flew so low that he passed over the George Washington Bridge at only 900 feet. The people on the bridge were terrified to see the plane so close, but they had no idea how bad things were on board. With the plane speeding at 140 miles per hour, Sullenberger saw the Hudson River in front of him, and he had no choice but to land on it. Everyone in the control tower was shocked to hear what he had to do, but there was no other option. Landing on a runway is one thing, but commercial pilots aren't trained to land in a river. Sullenberger had to think clearly and plan the landing while flying towards the ground. He made sure to allow the tail to touch the water before the nose. Landing nose first would compromise the engines further and cause even more damage. Amazingly, the plane touched down on the water without falling apart. Their momentum gradually decreased until they were at a slow, steady pace across the surface. From a distance, people might have thought it was just a slow-moving boat. A ferry arrived impressively quickly to fetch the stranded passengers, who waited on the wings and the inflatable slides. Everyone received minor injuries from the collision with the river, but they all survived. Captain Sullenberger went down in history as one of the most remarkable pilots ever, having saved so many people from a seemingly hopeless situation. There was even a movie made about his heroics.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Turbulence is caused by sudden shifts in the airflow and is nothing to be afraid of. But if that simple knowledge doesn't help you, try this visualization from a pilot. Put a small piece of napkin inside a pot of jelly. The napkin is the plane, and it's surrounded by by air pressure. If you tap the jelly, the napkin will not fall anywhere. It just starts slightly moving within the jelly. Once the plane gets to its cruising altitude, it seems like the engine noise disappears altogether. No worries there, the engine is still working fine. It becomes way quieter than on takeoff because there's less thrust generated at this point. The air gets thinner, and the plane needs less power to maintain its altitude. If the pilots leave the engines at their climb setting, you'd be traveling beyond the speed of sound, and that isn't a part of the plan. That small hole you see on the back of airplane tails is part of the auxiliary power unit. It's there to produce power for an airplane's electrical systems, including lights, navigation controls, heating, and AC. The power unit is activated when a plane is on the runway. It doesn't provide complete power to airplanes. Once the airplane engines are turned on, the unit is disabled. It's only reactivated when the airplane lands at its destination. The turbines are located under the wings, since this makes it cheaper, faster, and easier to service the engines. They used to be placed in the tail, but it required expensive equipment and much more time to repair. When they started installing the engines below the wings, ticket prices went down. When seated in the exit row on most planes, you need to pull the window blind up, not down, to close it, unlike in all other seats. It's designed so for safety reasons. The overwing exit is there to help people quickly leave the plane in case of an emergency. Some of those exit window doors stay attached to the plane, others come away from the fuselage, but they all have an emergency handle at the top of the panel. You wouldn't be able to open the exit without it. There's another handle on the outside of the plane. Rescuers use it to open the door from their side. Because of this handle, there's no room for the blind to retract above the window. But there's more than enough room for it below the window. Makes sense to me now. You can actually raise the right armrest when in the aisle seat. The lock is on the underside of the armrest. It's not a button, but a lever close to the back of the seat. You can pull it to let the other passengers pass to their seats. The same tip works for the left armrest of the window seat. You can lift it up to lean on the window. Don't forget to lower the armrest during takeoff and landing for safety reasons. Planes usually use a small, powerful tug on airport grounds when they need to pull back out of their parking spot. But it doesn't mean they can't move backwards on their own. To do so, they need to use reverse thrust, and the powerful air current from it can pull some debris into the engine or cause damage to ground vehicles, the gate, or the ground crew. It would also use a lot of fuel and be incredibly loud. Plus, the pilots don't have rear-view mirrors like drivers, so they can't see behind them. Now you understand why this risky process is banned at airports. They make plane wings smooth to let air flow easily around their surface and reduce resistance during the flight. Those convex, yellow hooks, though, don't they worsen the aerodynamics? True, but they are necessary for your safety. Imagine a plane making an emergency landing in the open sea. The aircraft is sliding on the water. Then, rescue boats arrive to evacuate the passengers. Before the door opens, the escape slide inflates. Passengers need to walk on the wing and move down the slide, but the wing surface is slippery because of water. To prevent anyone from falling, the stewards install a rescue rope. They attach one end to the door and the other to the edge of the wing, passing it through these hooks. During the evacuation, people hold on to this cable like a railing. They can also attach rescue boats to the wing with a rope and these hooks, so the sea won't take people far away from the plane. When flight attendants pass through the cabin during the flight, they always touch the upper shelves above the seats. No, they don't check if the luggage compartments are closed. There are hidden handles along the bottom of these compartments. Flight attendants hold on to them not to fall. It's a pretty convenient thing since they don't have to touch the seats and disturb passengers once they're moving around the cabin. Have you ever noticed the flashing light in the cabin before takeoff? It's 100% safe. It occurs when the pilot disconnects a plane from the airport power supply and switches to the onboard one. This rapid transition may cause flashing. Passengers always board from the left side. That's because the captain sits on that side of the cabin. It's easier for him to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge this way. Also, the aircraft is fueled and loaded with baggage on the right side. With passengers boarding from the left side, the crew can do their job undisturbed. You might have noticed black triangles on the wall above the seats. For you, as a passenger, they may indicate the seats that have the best view of the wings, where you can take the most beautiful flight photos. But the triangles aren't there for this reason, of course. The crew members monitor the condition of the aircraft through windows under these signs. In case the wings freeze, the engine catches fire, or the pilot receives a signal something's wrong, the crew will quickly move to the triangles and assess the situation. Those mysterious chimes you hear during the flight are a kind of secret language the crew uses to communicate with each other. The chime you hear shortly after takeoff informs the crew that the landing gear is getting retracted. A single chime during the flight is a sign that one of the passengers needs the assistance of the crew. When they're serving meals and run out of food or drinks, they can ask their colleagues to share using a high and low chime combo. 3 low tones mean serious turbulence is approaching, so the crew needs to buckle up. A seatbelt on an airplane has a slightly different purpose from that in your car. The one in the vehicle protects you from a horizontal hit. When a plane is going through turbulence, it's shaking up and down. Your waist belt keeps you from hitting the ceiling. The tray table, the seatbelt buckle, and the toilet door handle. Those are some major feeding grounds for bacteria. But the seat pockets aren't any cleaner. Passengers leave their used tissues or wipes in there after cleaning a runny nose or coughing. They also become a residence for other sorts of trash. Even once the trash is out, the bacteria remain in their cozy pocket home. The next passenger becomes their new prospective target. Blech. Extreme heat is one of the weather conditions that can stop a plane from flying. Airplanes fly by generating lift with their wings. The air below the wings takes the plane up. In extreme heat, the airplane can't produce that much lift. That's because hot air expands and becomes way less dense than cold air. With less lift, the plane may find it really hard to take off and fly. Electronics will unlikely respond well to extreme heat or humidity, and the AC system may fail. Smaller jets can't operate at a temperature of over 118 degrees Fahrenheit. Larger Airbus and Boeing planes perform the best below 126 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side. That little yellow hook you can see from the airplane's window if you're sitting next to the wing is there to help you in case of an emergency landing. Inflatable slides can only be deployed from the emergency exit doors in the front and the tail of the plane. In the middle, the passengers would have to walk right out on the wing and get to the ground from there. But jumping from the plane wing isn't safe because it's just too high. And here's where those little yellow hooks come in handy. The flight attendants tie ropes from the doors and through the loops for the passengers to hold onto. This way, everyone can safely get to the ground without injuries. Now, you want to try to avoid cozying up under airplane blankets. Some airlines only wash them about once a month. Better use your own travel blanket, a scarf, or a jacket, and always remember to wear your shoes while walking around the plane. That carpet on the floor can't and won't be cleaned to perfection between flights. It's just too much time and effort for the cabin crew. The dirtiest place on a plane isn't the bathroom, it's your tray table. It has 8 times more bacteria than an onboard toilet flush button. Now, in case of emergency, oxygen masks only have enough airflow to last for about 15 minutes. Luckily, it's just the amount of time a plane needs to find a suitable landing place or to at least descend to the altitude where people won't need oxygen masks anymore. You may wonder why you're asked to lift your seat back and close your tray table before takeoff and landing, but it's for your own safety. A reclined seat is comfy for you, but it makes it harder for the passenger behind you to get out of their seat, which is crucial in case of an emergency. The lower tray table is the same way, only this time it's you who won't be able to stand up fast enough if anything happens. Besides, the tray table prevents you from assuming the secure position in the event of an emergency landing. This position requires you to bend over in your seat, put your head between your knees, and cover the back of your head with your hands. Imagine doing that while your tray table is open. If you look around the cabin, you'll notice little black or red triangles around the midsection of the plane. These stickers let the flight attendants know where the airplane wings are located so they can immediately look out the right window to see if something is amiss outside. You shouldn't lower the window shades while taking off, taxiing, or landing for 2 reasons. First, the flight attendants must always be able to monitor the situation outside, and open shades help them with that, obviously. Second, if something's gone wrong on board the plane while it's on the ground, for example, a fire, the ground crews won't be able to see it and evaluate the situation before going in unless the windows are open. That tiny hole you see at the bottom of any airplane window isn't there to scare you nuts. In fact, it helps keep the pressure from the inside and the outside of the window equalized. The hole itself is only made in the second layer of glass, and there are 3 of them overall, which also helps with security, by the way. Even if the outer glass breaks, there will still be 2 more to keep you safe. Now, you might see flight attendants touching the overhead compartments while they're walking along the aisle, but that's not exactly what they do. Right beneath the compartments, there's usually a handrail that goes all the way through the cabin, so you can also use this trick to stay firmer on your feet in the aisle. The pilots dim the lights in the cabin during nighttime, not for you to get cozy and sleepy. Our eyes have a hard time adjusting to darkness in the first few minutes of sudden lights out. And in the case of emergency, every second matters. So the lights get dimmed to let you get used to darkness in case something happens and you have to act fast. Pay attention to the aisle floor too. If there's an emergency landing at night, there will be 2 luminescent strips along the aisle showing you the way to the exit. Follow them to get safely out of the plane. Flight attendants also suggest counting the seats between you and the emergency exit once you're seated. This will help you navigate in case there's no other guidance available. If a lightning bolt hits the plane, the passengers won't feel it. The entire aircraft is covered with aluminum coating that conducts electrical current and doesn't let it inside. This protection is tested using a lightning simulator. Airplane windows are round because the air pressure is evenly distributed this way. If the plane's windows were square, strong air currents would accumulate in the corners of the windows, depressurizing the cabin. And that's bad. Don't think you become untouchable if you go to the airplane toilet. The bathroom door can be opened from the outside. There's usually a small latch at the top of the door that allows cabin crew to get you out of there. It's useful for both getting to people doing something suspicious in the bathroom and helping those who don't feel well and, for example, collapsed while in the toilet. Yeah, let's avoid doing that. The plane's wings flash red and green lights at night to show the direction the plane is heading in. A green light is always on the right wing, and a red one is on the left. Aircraft tires are designed to withstand 4 to 5 times more pressure than they actually experience upon landing. The wheel is more likely to break than the tire. Pilots always have different meals. This is necessary to reduce the risk of food poisoning. The flight can still go well if one of the pilots has gone down because of a stale burrito, but not if it's both of them. And try not to both of you eat the fish. Some airlines don't allow pilots to have beards. Facial hair can prevent securely fitting the oxygen mask, and pilots must always remain conscious. The seats are blue in most aircraft because this color soothes people. It's also easy to keep clean. The rumbling noise you hear after boarding the plane is luggage being loaded on the plane. The compartment is right beneath the cabin, so it can sound quite loud sometimes. On most flights longer than 7 or 8 hours, pilots have access to a specially designed rest seat in or near the cockpit. Flight attendants typically have a section of the cabin reserved for them, and it's sometimes separated from the passenger areas. Some larger aircraft even feature private crew quarters above or below the main cabin. The wings of most passenger aircraft are located at the bottom of the plane. It's called a low wing. Firstly, if you install the engine under low wings, it'll be closer to the ground and easier to repair. Secondly, the wings will take on part of the shock in case of a hard landing. And if the plane falls into the water, then the wings become a life-saving pillow. By the way, a plane can stay afloat for 10 minutes to 60 hours. It all depends on the model of the plane, weather conditions, and pilot skills. Now, most airplanes are white because this color best reflects the sun rays and the aircraft body doesn't heat up as much. Also, the damage is best seen on white, and white paint is simply cheaper. Shoulder straps seem more secure than just a waist belt, but not in the case of planes. When the plane gets into turbulence, it's tossed a bit in the air. The waist belt will simply hold you in place in case of a more severe shake. Shoulder straps would require more space between the seats, and this is not justified on a plane. In a car, the impact is usually much stronger, so you need that shoulder strap not to whoosh through the windshield. Flight attendant seats do have passenger straps, but that's because they are much less comfortable than passenger ones. They're narrower and positioned facing the passengers. Flight attendants need extra protection simply not to fall off their seats if the plane shakes hard enough. Also, they have to help and direct people during potential evacuation, and for that, they need to be in top shape. Now maybe you've noticed that you always enter the plane from its left side. Firstly, the captain usually sits on that side. This way, it's easier for the captain to align the plane with the terminal jet bridge. Also, the aircraft is fueled and loaded with the baggage on the right side. If passengers come from the left, the crew can do their job undisturbed. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side. Now, here's something scary. You're hanging in the air at an altitude of 30,000 feet. Frightening? Okay, let me make it better. The altitude is the same, but you're inside a large metal tube of an aircraft. Your flight is a really long one, and now, 6 cups of water later, you feel the urge to visit the bathroom. But the line is so long. Suddenly, a rather geeky thought bubbles up in your mind. Each of these people is going to flush the toilet after using it. But how can a plane carry so much water? And where does all that waste go? Surely it doesn't get dumped mid-flight upon pre-selected cities along the way, splattering all over the ground and… Okay, that's enough. One pilot has revealed the secret. All the waste goes through special plumbing to the rear of the plane. There, it's stored in sealed compartments. When the plane arrives at its destination, the ground crew removes all that waste. On a long-haul flight, toilets can be flushed more than 1,000 times, which creates up to 320 gallons of waste. Now, about that water. Have you ever seen a toilet bowl filled with water on a plane? No. That's because on a plane, you use a vacuum toilet. It's not your regular home toilet bowl filled with water. When you flush this good old toilet, a siphon drains the bowl and gravity then carries the water further into the sewer system. But this approach won't work on an aircraft because it's moving. The water would splash out through the whole flight, especially when the plane is flying through a region of turbulence. But if there's no water, you can't use gravity or siphon to empty the toilet bowl. Instead, when you flush, a valve opens in the sewer line, and the vacuum pulls the waste out of the bowl into a special tank. And since the vacuum does all the work, there's almost no need for water, or rather bright blue sanitizing liquid they use in planes. That's why such a system needs just half a gallon of fluid or even less for one flush. In comparison, a water-saving toilet uses 1.6 gallons, and a regular toilet needs 5 gallons of liquid. Okay, we figured out how planes deal with all that waste accumulating during the flight. But let's imagine another situation, a cracked cockpit windshield. The thing is, such a windshield consists of 2 panes of thick glass with a plastic layer for heating in between. Either of these panes can hold the full pressure if something happens to the other. So even if a windshield cracks, the airplane remains safe. This happens very infrequently, but when it does, pilots usually descend to reduce the pressure on the windshield and, if necessary, change their itinerary. Okay, now let's speak about what we can do if there's a dangerous snake in the cockpit. Now, you might say I'm making this up, or I saw it in that Samuel L. Jackson movie, but it was a real situation. A South African pilot had flown a small plane with 4 passengers to an altitude of 11,000 feet when he noticed something that was, shall we say, by no means supposed to be inside, a cobra slithering under his seat. For a second, he was just staring at the reptile. Then, not wanting to cause panic, the pilot very calmly told his companions about the unticketed stowaway. The plane had to make an emergency landing. In this case, the pilot decided to be honest with his passengers. But sometimes, pilots choose to replace the words that make certain people nervous, like turbulence, with other, much more innocent expressions. And if you want to be in the know, pay attention to the following signs. If a pilot tells the cabin crew to sit down, a patch of bumpy road is ahead. Another expression you should be on the lookout for is, "We're flying through an air pocket." This air pocket is just another word for the winds jostling your plane from different directions. But here's the thing, the term air pocket causes way less panic than turbulence. And there's also the area of weather. This phrase usually means heavy rain or a thunderstorm not far from a flying plane. So don't be surprised if your captain says, "There's an area of weather ahead, we're going to fly around it." Oh, and since we started on the mysterious language pilots use, here are some more examples. You can overhear a pilot saying, "George is flying the plane." And no, they don't mean their colleague. That's how the plane's autopilot system is called. George is programmed to follow a certain route, taking into consideration the weather conditions, turbulence, and altitude. Pilots normally use the autopilot after reaching cruising altitude or after flying for more than 10 hours. that's when they're expected to rest. Sometimes you may overhear that there's a pilot in the jump seat. It's not a rare occasion when an off-duty pilot or other flight personnel takes a jump seat when flying back to their home base. Federal Aviation Administration inspectors can also travel in fold-up seats. Some airlines may even offer jump seats to pilots working for other companies. Also, if you were wondering, there's no connection between the jump seat and actually jumping out of the plane itself. Now, if your first flight has arrived late and you're in a mad rush to catch your connecting flight, you're called a runner. You might overhear crew members or ground staff saying, "Runners are on the way." It means you're waiting for some transfer passengers. Unfortunately, if a flight has a strict departure time, it may leave without runners. Now, if you hear a pilot saying "pan, pan," it's not a great sign. Trouble is on the way. Pilots use this term in their communication with air traffic controllers. This is the signal, which means that something has gone wrong with the flight and the cockpit crew needs immediate attention. When other pilots who are using the same radio frequency hear this signal, they stop all their communication and let the pan-pan pilot get their message through. 359er. Nah, it's not some mega secret code. It's the way pilots pronounce certain numbers in their pilot English. Tree stands for 3, 5 for 5, and niner is used instead of 9. Such pronunciation helps to avoid radio miscommunications and the confusion caused by similar-sounding numbers. We're just finishing some paperwork. If you hear the captain saying this phrase, it doesn't mean you're in for a delay. Finishing paperwork usually means revisiting the flight itinerary, checking the plane's weight and balance, or even waiting for the ground staff to prepare the flight's logbook. The final approach means a bit different things for pilots and flight attendants. The cabin crew speaks of the final approach when the plane is nearing the final part of the descent. For pilots, the final approach means that the plane is already aligned with the runway and they don't need to maneuver or make additional turns. If a pilot refers to a ferry flight, F-E-R-R-Y, they speak about a situation when an empty plane with no passengers or cargo on board gets flown from one place to another. For the cabin crew, it's the time when they can relax. Ferry flights may happen when there's a technical problem with an airliner and pilots need to bring it back to its home base. But even if the flight is full, the crew still has an opportunity to rest. Some Boeing jets have a place where crew members can relax during their shift. The door to this safe haven looks like any other covered door. But once you open it, you'll see a narrow staircase leading to a small room with 2 beds separated by curtains. There's also some place for staff to hang their uniforms. By the way, some pilots say they don't like it when people clap when the plane lands. They say they aren't doing anything special since it's just their job. You don't clap for the mail carrier when they deliver your mail, do you? That's a rhetorical question, one of them asks. You're also not supposed to tip your pilots, even if you really want to, because it's weird, as some of them admit. The whole tipping aspect is new in the flying industry. And while tipping flight attendants is becoming more common, who would have thought? Giving money to pilots is kind of frowned upon. Why do cats like to like people? Whoops, that's supposed to read lick people. Sorry. There are a few potential reasons for this. First, they're collecting biochemical information from your skin. They could also be marking you as one of their possessions. Admit it, this totally sounds like cats. And it could be that they're just letting you know they trust you, or at least showing you they don't find you to be some serious threat or competition. How come bananas get sweeter as they ripen? Fruits don't disperse their seeds randomly. They do it when animals eat them. At a certain stage, they suddenly increase their sugar content, which is how they try to encourage animals to eat them at that stage, specifically when their seeds are mature. Mature seeds have developed special coatings that protect them when passing through the animal's digestive system. Do I have to paint you a picture? Why does our skin get wrinkly after we spend time in water? After 5 to 10 minutes in the bathtub, you will notice there are small wrinkles forming on your feet and hands. Scientists speculate that it could be the way our body gets a better grip when immersed in a slippery environment. Our wrinkly fingers improve our grip on submerged or wet objects. Also, they channel water away in a similar way to the rain treads on car tires. When you eat something really sour, you just don't feel it on your tongue. Sometimes your entire face contracts, so everyone around can see that you don't like the food you're eating. That specific sour flavor that causes this reaction is the result of the hydrogen ions that acids release when they mix with saliva. Yes, that's a mouthful of science. At the moment when your mouth detects this sign of an acid, it sends you a message in a pretty dramatic way, so you can't ignore it. It's an evolutionary response that made sense in the old times, because many of the plants that our ancestors found in nature and later wanted to consume were poisonous, especially plants with sour flavors. So even today, your taste receptors light up and your face twists in a way that is out of your control when you taste something like that. Like this. A lighter color on an airplane is actually heavier than darker paint. The color white requires a higher solid content than black to get the necessary saturation. And the higher the solid content is, the heavier the paint is going to be, which is why white paint is one of the heaviest. But white planes are more efficient than black ones, although this also depends on how you define efficient. The white paint reflects more sunlight than the dark one. Different colors absorb different wavelengths of light, and white objects heat up more slowly compared to darker ones. This results in a cooler interior, which is why it's easier for the entire plane to remain cool. If your hot tea tastes odd when you drink it out of a plastic cup, don't worry, it's not just you. You might imagine that the tea is dissolving something from the plastic, but this most likely isn't the case. The taste you perceive is not just the action of your taste buds. All senses are contributing here. That's why strawberry mousse has a sweeter taste on a white plate than on a black one. And you get the feeling chips are crunchier when you hear those specific higher frequency sounds as you eat them. Also, hot chocolate has a better taste when you drink it from an orange cup. We are kind of conditioned to drink hot tea from ceramic cups, which is why seeing it in a plastic cup subconsciously makes us expect vending machine tea that won't taste good. Flamingos often stand on one leg, and one theory says that's because it helps them conserve body heat. One piece of evidence for that is that they tuck one leg up more often in water than on land. Others believe this is how they save energy, not heat. These birds are definitely more stable on one leg when it comes to standing for long periods of time. That's because they can lock the tendons and ligaments in their legs in a stable position, which means their muscles don't have to work hard to stay in one place. Plus, it's actually a classic look, don't you think? Why do repetitive noises annoy us so much? It's simple. They're constantly attracting our attention so we can't focus on other things. We stop reacting to certain repetitive sounds like ticking clocks really quickly. But some are just too annoying, like a slowly dripping faucet. The reason why this bothers us so much is the lack of control. When you know you can stop the noise anytime you want, you won't find it that annoying. Why do all planets make circles around the sun in the same direction? It would be cool to go back 4.6 billion years. You'd be able to see that space wasn't empty back then, even though our solar system wasn't formed yet. There was a cloud of dust and gas in a place where, today, our sun and the planets are. This cloud was like a solar nebula, and it molded our solar system. Generally speaking, a nebula is a huge cloud of gas and dust that occupies the space between stars and helps form new ones, together with the planets that orbit them. When this nebula collapsed, its center became our sun, while the rest of the matter got together and created the planets we know today, together with their moons and the rest of the rocky bodies like asteroids. The matter was quickly rotating, and the process looked a bit like cheese dough flattening into a disk that was getting bigger and bigger. Since the cloud was moving in a certain direction to begin with, all of the planets retain the same orbital plane too. Something massive needs to happen to alter a planet's orbit and force it to go in the opposite direction around the sun. Why do some people have such a good singing range? There are 3 things that can affect the general range of sounds coming out of your mouth: the strength of your diaphragm, the size of your vocal folds, and the shape of the chambers in your sinuses. But making the sound beautiful is largely a question of practice. Practice? Yep. At the basic level, you hear a note and reproduce it with your voice. But the true difference between being able to just hold a tune and having a lovely singing voice is related to the thousands of small muscle contractions that are mostly unconscious. They adjust your muscle mechanism where you produce a voice with the emotions you have while singing. Like with other musical instruments, a wider finger span can help you while playing the piano. But the rest is learning those subtle things like pressure on the keys and timing. Now, why do dogs hear higher pitches than us? Humans hear frequencies up to approximately 20 kHz and dogs up to 45 kHz. Nearly all mammals can hear higher frequencies than other vertebrates. Birds hear up to 12 kHz and reptiles, amphibians, and fish up to 5 kHz. Mammals don't need to hear high frequencies to communicate with each other, but so they can locate where a certain sound is coming from. The special way of hearing that mammals use, binaural spectral difference cueing, works in a way that our brain compares the frequency range of a sound as it gets to each ear. Head shadows one ear, so some of the frequencies get absorbed, and our brain absorbs higher frequencies more than lower ones. And the smaller the head, the less effect it has on lower frequency sounds. That's why the animal must be able to hear high frequencies to hear a wider spectrum of sounds. A mouse needs to hear up to 90 kHz, and an elephant is fine with just 10. Dogs have smaller heads than us, so they're in the middle category. Why are oceans salty? Well, chemically speaking, salt is sodium chloride, and the salt in the ocean isn't just these two, but many other ions like calcium and magnesium. Most of these start out like rocks on land. Certain things like wind and rain erode these rocks, which basically means they gradually wear them away. So we can say most of the salt in the ocean comes from rocks. Minerals from these rocks leach into streams and rivers. They carry the salt away into the ocean. About 85% of the ions in the ocean are sodium and chloride, while magnesium and sulfate make up around 10%. And some of the salt that ends up in the ocean doesn't stay there. Animals consume a lot of it. But because of a steady supply of runoff from the surface, levels of salinity are pretty much constant. The ocean also gets its salt from one more source: hydrothermic fluids. Magma coming from behind the Earth's crust heats up deep sea vents. When they get hot enough, they lead to chemical reactions between the seawater and all the minerals from the rocks around the vents. That's why every part of the ocean is salty, but the level of salinity depends on where in the world you are. So take that with a grain of, That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Is the sky like a desert? Can a commercial aircraft fly faster than the speed of sound? Can you fix a plane with a piece of tape? Let's check your intuition with this cool truth or myth airplane quiz. Make sure to note down your correct answers and share your score in the comments. So, the first one for you. Commercial airplanes are more fuel efficient than your car. True or false? That's actually true. Commercial flights have been more fuel efficient per person per mile than cars for more than a decade. Better technologies and a larger number of people that fit in one plane have decreased the energy intensity of traveling by air by almost 74%. As for cars, it's been just a 57% drop. Okay, how about this one? There's no row 13 on a plane. Well, come to think of it, I've never seen a 13A or any other letter on my boarding pass. What about you? That's true, but only partially. In those countries where the number 13 is considered unlucky, there's really no row 13. But in other countries, the missing number may differ depending on what is believed to bring bad luck there. Opening a plane door during the flight is a real safety risk. It sounds kinda terrifying to me, but is it true? You can relax, that's just a myth. For one thing, the doors are locked, but even if they weren't, no one can open the door of a flying plane. It's physically impossible. The cabin pressure won't allow anybody to do it. When an airplane is at cruising altitude, it's pressurized. The difference between the inside and outside is huge. In other words, the pressure inside the cabin pushes on the door and doesn't allow anyone to open it from the inside. Even better, the airplane door is called a plug door. Its inner edge is wider than the outer. That's why it acts like a bathtub drain stopper, corking the doorway without falling through. Your skin is drier on a plane than it would be in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Can you believe this? And if you think this is true, you're absolutely right. The airplane cabin is pressurized, and the humidity there is set to 20%. For comparison, in the Sahara Desert, the average air humidity is around 25%, and your skin is used to at least 40% of humidity. That's why your nose and throat feel so dry when you're flying. Several years ago, someone posted a photo on the internet that became viral in no time. In this image, there was an airline technician, and he seemed to be fixing a plane with duct tape. So the question is, could it be true? Or was it just a fake? The answer isn't so simple. It wasn't your regular duct tape, so partially, this fact is a myth. But it was some kind of tape, known as speed tape. It costs around $700 per roll. It's actually an aluminum adhesive you can use to temporarily mend minor damage, until you can repair it properly. Is it true that pilots avoid the Bermuda Triangle? After all, it has such a notorious reputation. Ships and planes simply disappear into thin air in this region. This one is certainly a myth. Today, people already know that there's no particular danger in the Bermuda Triangle, and planes fly over this area as usual. Airplanes mostly fly on their own, with autopilots doing all the work. Myth or truth? What's your bet? It's a widespread myth. Many people are sure that planes are some super automated mechanisms that can fly mostly by themselves, and pilots are there simply for backup. In reality, though, flying is a hands-on job. It needs constant attention and a skilled flight crew. There once was a plane that flew twice faster than the speed of sound. Can it be true, or is it too far-fetched? This fact is definitely not a myth. The Concorde could reach a speed of 1,330 miles per hour. That's much faster than the speed of sound, which is around 767 miles per hour. And that's indeed almost twice as slow as the Concorde. You might have heard this scary fact before. Planes empty toilets right in the air. Sounds alarming, but is it true? Fortunately, that's only a myth. There's absolutely nothing to this legend. Airplane toilets use a vacuum-based system to transport all the contents out of the bowl and into a special tank. It's located in the rear part of the aircraft, and this tank gets emptied only on the ground. This is a tricky one. When a plane is flying towards the east, it can reach higher speeds. So, can the speed really depend on the direction? And this is true. It's possible thanks to high-altitude winds, known as jet streams. They blow at a speed of 100 to 300 miles per hour, and since our planet rotates from west to east, aircraft moving in the same direction can use these winds to move faster. Do you think pilots can control airflow to keep passengers sleepy and relaxed and save on fuel? This one is definitely a myth. If you ask a pilot this question, you might hear "ridiculous" in reply. The truth is that pressurization determines the oxygen level in the cabin. How about this one? The world's tallest air traffic control tower is as high as a skyscraper. Can it be true, or is it just an impressive myth? I know it's hard to believe, but it's actually true. When an airplane lands, it needs the assistance of runway lights and airport beacons. It's part of the responsibilities of the air traffic control tower. It also manages ground traffic. No wonder such construction needs to be extra tall. The new Bangkok International Airport in Thailand has a 430-foot tall tower. Its height is almost the same as the height of a 40-story building. It cost $18 million to build the tower. I've got another tough one for you. The sensitivity of your taste buds dropped by 30% during the flight. Yes or no? This is true. The pressure in the cabin combined with the dryness of the air kinda numbs your taste buds. But the most curious thing here is that this mostly affects salty and sweet flavors. If you're served something spicy or bitter, you can still taste it as usual. Airline caterers try to take the decreased sensitivity of your taste buds into account while preparing airplane meals. They have to modify lots of good old recipes to make your food taste better. As soon as your oxygen mask is on, in case the cabin is depressurized, you can relax and breathe out. You can still use it till the end of the flight. I wish it was true, but is it? Sadly, it's a myth. Passenger oxygen masks usually provide enough air to breathe normally for 10 to 15 minutes. In other words, it's just a temporary solution. But in most cases, this time is enough for the plane to go down to the altitude of 10,000 feet. That's where people can breathe without using oxygen masks. And since planes descend very fast, the need for additional oxygen lasts for a few minutes at most. By the way, the oxygen system gets tested regularly during special maintenance checks. Plus, both passengers' and pilots' oxygen flow doesn't depend on electricity. Masks use individual oxygen generators, so even if there's some electrical problem on board, the oxygen doesn't get cut off. Many people say that the plane is the safest means of travel, but do you believe in it? That's a myth. Flying is the second safest. Studies show that the elevator is safer. Unfortunately, it won't be able to take you to the Bahamas. Okay, this last one was kind of a joke. Statistically, planes are indeed the safest way to get to your destination. So, how many correct answers did you have? Tell me in the comments below. Me, 8. Duh.
Pilots can't eat similar meals when they're working. Imagine that you're on a transoceanic flight. The airplane is flying over the Pacific Ocean. Flight attendants deliver the dinner meals. Everyone is enjoying the pasta. The sauce tastes a bit funny though. That's probably okay. After all, you are eating an aircraft meal. It can't taste like a 5-star chef plate. Time goes by. Oh no! You were right! Something was indeed wrong with the food. But if all the passengers have the same problem, so do the pilots. To prevent both of them being out of order, pilots are advised not to eat the same meal at the same time. In such a scenario, if one pilot feels bad, the other one can take over. I mean, this is not an imperative rule stated by the Federal Aviation Administration, but most airlines make their own rules about this matter. Flight attendants have access to hidden equipment, such as a defibrillator, supplemental oxygen, a fire extinguisher, and duct tape. But probably the most interesting gear they have is handcuffs. These objects are there to protect passengers from others, and sometimes from themselves. Turns out that flight attendants have everything they need to defuse a troublemaker. Aviator sunglasses look cool on pilots in movies, but in real life, they don't wear polarized glasses. First off, they have a glare-reducing effect. This can cause some trouble in the cockpit. A pilot has to read instruments, but the stuff in the cockpit, such as LCD displays, emits polarized light. So a pilot with those cool polarized glasses can't read the displays with 100% efficiency. Pilots shouldn't wear these glasses simply because of safety concerns. Imagine a shimmer of glare coming from another plane's windscreen, but the pilot missed the sign because of polarized sunglasses. Ever noticed a hole in the tail of an airplane? Well, most commercial airplanes have it. Next time you get into an airplane, take a closer look. The hole has a fancy name, Auxiliary Power Unit. It looks like a hole from the outside, but that is actually a hidden turbine engine. Most of the time, the APU will remain off for the entire flight. It will start working when the plane lands. It provides power to the cabin lights, air conditioning, and cockpit electronics. Don't underestimate the APU's power though. It can also provide the power required to start the main engines. You've watched a Brightside video and learned what the APU is. A perfect icebreaker. Unfortunately, you're not in a chatty mood. You just want to take the plane, land, and start your vacation. Yet again, there is only one door to board. You are at the end of a queue. Why don't planes generally have multiple doors? According to the experts, the biggest issue is that the bridge takes up a lot of space. When an aircraft is loaded from the front and the rear, it takes up 2 slots. This is not ideal for the administrators. Newly remodeled or constructed terminals tend to have dual boarding compared to the older terminals. Change of scenery, let's jump into a cruise ship. There are hidden passageways and secret doors in ships. These secrets are from an insider. Staff on the ship mostly work in their designated area. How does a worker get from one place to another without using the stairs and doors that the passengers use? There is a network of corridors and stairs all around the ship, used only by the crew. I mean it when I say secret doors. They blend with the walls, so they go undetected by those who don't know where the door is. Maybe you can stumble by accident. Here's a clue. Pay attention to the walls near the guest stairs. Try to think of those gigantic cruise ships as floating metals. This leads me to a cruise cabin fun fact. The walls of the cruise ship cabin are magnetic. Imagine you're traveling to multiple countries on board a cruise ship, a single-month voyage. You collect destination-themed magnets and decorate your cabin. True cruise fans know this magnet magic, so they put a couple of magnetic hooks into their luggage. Neat tip. Use magnetic hooks to add extra storage in your cabin. Hang clothes and accessories, postcards, or hats. Speaking of ships, why do some ships and boats have small holes constantly releasing water? To keep the bilge free of water. Water builds up over time inside the bilge, and the bilge pump automatically pumps the water out again. Ships don't have headlights. Using a headlight could prevent accidents. If they work for cars, why not for ships? Headlights are the source of light, but the light that comes out of them bounces back at the light source at some point. With cars, for instance, headlights work because the area you want lit is narrow, and you can easily take action if you see an obstacle on the road. For ships, this is super hard. The light source should be powerful enough to light the area the captain wants to see. Large cargo ships, for instance, need more than a mile to stop or take action. Plus, imagine how much brighter should the ship's light be to light the whole area in front of it. They do see each other with different sorts of lights called navigation lights. These are small but practical. They arrange it in a standardized way so that ships could see each other. The exciting thing is that they don't just notice one another in the dark, they also understand each other's movements and directions. Here's an example. Imagine a ship with two nav lights. The one on the front is lower, near the ship floor. The other one on the back is high up. This means the vessel goes to the right. It can safely pass by the other ships without hitting them. Trains don't have seatbelts. A bit weird. Every time there is a crash related to trains, this matter comes up. Pretty much nowhere in the world seatbelts are used on trains. Various studies have been made about this issue. Some of them created simulations of accidents, and the results were surprising. Using a seatbelt on a train could potentially increase the number of injuries. In cars, seatbelts are highly effective in protecting the passenger and are used all the time. The logic behind the seatbelt is to protect the person when a collision causes rapid deceleration. But trains carry so much momentum that they don't stop rapidly. On a plane, passengers use a seatbelt on takeoff, during landing, and if turbulence occurs. There are no such things for trains. Entering and leaving a station is not a high risk. Experts believe focusing and making investments are other ways to improve railway safety. Now, you are traveling by train. You look outside the window. There are small stones along the railway tracks to accompany you on the journey. Those stones are formally known as track ballast. They do a very important job. They provide support to and maintain the tracks. They're not there by mere coincidence, though. Now look at the stones closer. You can notice that there is no single smoothly cut stone on the tracks, because they're not regular stones randomly poured at the rails. Each rock has sharp and abrupt edges. Sharp edges hold on to each other. They protect the railroad from harsh concussions. They facilitate water drainage in heavy rain and keep down the grass and other weeds. Now imagine replacing those with round pebbles. They will slide down. Eventually, the ballast will spread out and tracks will fall apart. The last thing you would want, especially if you were a passenger on that train.
How can spiders survive when they lose a leg? When they're in a dangerous situation and try to run away, they can lose legs and regrow them only a couple months later. They'll survive without any problem because most of the time, their legs come off at break points. Those are joints that contain muscles and constrict, which helps spiders minimize blood loss. If they lose a leg at the part that comes before the break point, the spider still sheds it, but it will lose more blood. It will be harder for the animal to recover in this case. Speaking of spiders, have you noticed how they sometimes stay extremely still for a long time? They're motionless while waiting for potential prey to land in their web. When moving around, they waste energy and drive unnecessary attention to themselves. Either a hungry bird praying for a quick snack will see it, or a spider will remain hungry because flies will be less likely to come near their web. When spinning a web, they waste a lot of energy. Even after the web is finished, a spider may have to wait for days or weeks to catch something. So, it's important to save as much energy as possible. Hunting spiders are way more active, but the majority of them are nocturnal predators. They spend their days relaxing, tucked away under a rock or in a nest. Roast potatoes can stay hot for a really long time, and this mostly has to do with the fatty, starchy crust that's like some sort of an insulating layer. When you pre-boil a potato, this causes its starch granules to absorb water and swell until carb molecules seep out to produce this type of thick gel. Since potatoes are in the oven, high temperatures drive off moisture. This makes the gelatinized starch on the outside of the potato chunk and creates a crispy crust. This crust traps the heat inside. The fat from the baking tray collects in cracks too, and the heat-keeping structure stays strong. Birds don't get electrocuted while perching on power lines because it's not voltages that will harm them, but voltage differences, and electricity wouldn't flow without them. So, if you see a bird standing on a single power line at, for example, 35,000 volts, the lack of a voltage difference is something that keeps the animal safe. But if it accidentally extends its wings and touches another power line that's at a different voltage, it won't end well. That's the reason why electricity companies make sure there's plenty of space between the cables. Have you ever wondered why airplane pilots won't try to land on grass when the landing gear doesn't deploy? The grass may seem like a good solution at first because it's soft, true. But the surface will neither be smooth nor even. When pressure is high, landing on grass can lead to unpredictable movements and cause issues such as structure formation. That happens because of bouncing and unequal pressure. This can even result in fuel leakage and prevent the doors from opening. Bald heads tend to be shiny, even though the skin elsewhere on the human body isn't. Most of our skin is covered with tiny hairs that give it some sort of velvety peach fuzz look. With male pattern baldness, the hair follicles tend to shrink and turn into skin cells, which means there's no hair there at all. And the scalp is especially shiny due to the sebaceous glands. They produce and secrete some kind of oily matter that protects our skin. Sebaceous glands are located all across our skin, but the scalp has way more of them. So, this oil coats the skin, which is why it turns into a more reflective surface. House cats will rarely meow at one another, but they become chatty with humans, and this could be related to domestication. The process of taming cats and keeping them as pets started nearly 10,000 years ago. Before that, cats were pretty much loners. They rarely encountered other cats, so they didn't even have to use their voices to communicate with each other. Instead, they communicated through their sense of smell, which included things like rubbing against a certain object, for example, a tree. So they didn't even have to come face to face with other members of their species to send a message. And that's how they mostly communicate today as well. But humans don't have such a good sense of smell as cats, so these foxy creatures had to think of a way to send us a message and still get what they wanted from us, which turned out to be meowing. If you're planning a day trip to a desert, for example, the Sahara in North Africa, you're going to want to bring good sunscreen, and a lot of water, of course, but also a snug sleeping bag if you're planning to spend the night there too. Deserts really become cold during the night. In the Sahara, temperatures go from an average high of 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day to 25 degrees during the night. Such dramatic change happens because of two main factors: humidity and sand. Sand doesn't retain heat that well. When light and heat from the sun reach a desert, sand grains from the top layer absorb heat. But they release it back into the air relatively quickly. So during the day, the sand radiates the energy coming from the sun, which eventually heats the air and leads to extremely high temperatures. And during the night, the sand is quickly losing heat once again. But this time, there's no sunlight that would reheat the desert. That leaves the sand colder than before and leads to such low temperatures. In arid deserts such as the Atacama Desert in Chile and the Sahara, the humidity is extremely low. That means the amount of water vapor in the air is almost zero. Unlike sand, water does well to store heat. Water vapor in the air traps heat close to the ground. It's like you cover the ground with a huge blanket. That way, you stop it from dissipating into the atmosphere. Also, when the air has a high level of humidity, it requires more energy to heat up. That means it takes more time for that same energy to disappear and for the surroundings to get colder. Since there's almost no humidity in deserts, such areas can both quickly heat up and cool down. If you microwave water for tea, it will taste worse than when it's made with a kettle. That's because the temperature of the liquid is the main factor for a good tea. Water should reach a rolling boil before you pour it over tea leaves, whether they're loose or bagged. It's an easy thing to do with tea kettles, both the electric and stovetop varieties. When the burner or the electric heating element is on, the water at the bottom of the vessel warms up. As it's getting hotter, water through the rest of the kettle comes to the boiling point. A microwave doesn't heat from the bottom up. It creates electromagnetic waves that randomly jump around the box. You probably notice when you try to reheat leftovers. They end up partially frozen in some spots and extremely hot in others. The same will happen with water because it's hard to control microwave energy. Overheated liquid won't be good for tea either. When water goes above 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the boiling point for water, it can destroy the compounds that give a tea its specific flavor. Have you ever wondered why those electrical plugs most Americans use have holes in the prongs? The story dates back to the early 20th century when Harvey Hubble Jr. invented different types of electrical plugs. He started with the detachable electric plug, which was the first ever of that type. Some of his designs had prongs with indents, those aligned with tiny bumps inside the electrical sockets. Such an indent and bump system secured the prongs in place after people would insert a plug into a socket. At some point, these indents gave way to holes, which worked in the same way. But that's just part of the story. Most of the modern outlets don't even have bumps anymore. They keep plugs from falling out of the wall by using friction and pressure. Today, some manufacturers insert a rod through all the holes in a line of prongs. That's how they lock them in place while encasing them in plastic. Some also say the holes save metal, which cuts costs of manufacturing in the long term.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side. You get on any airliner and notice the captain always sits in the left seat and the co-pilot on the right. And that's not by accident. The reasons could be historical. One theory goes that the first air forces were recruited from cavalry officers. They used to wear swords on their left side, so it was more comfortable for them to mount horses from the animal's left. When we eventually went from horses to metal birds, the tradition stuck. Another theory involves trains. The first international air route connected London and Paris. During this flight, pilots navigated by following the railroad. History has it that once, when the weather was especially bad, two planes collided because both were flying over the tracks. After that, it was agreed that the aircraft would fly on the right side of the track. Pilots had to sit on the left side of the plane to see how much clearance they had with oncoming aircraft on their left. As for helicopter pilots in command, they usually, but not always, sit on the right. Copters are more unstable than airplanes. That's why pilots prefer not to let go of the cyclic stick. This stick controls the helicopter's direction and altitude. The cyclic stick sits between the pilot's knees, and they use their right hand to hold onto it. The pilot's left hand moves the lever that changes the blade's pitch and presses other buttons on the central console. By the way, both seats have full control of an airplane. There are no regulations specifying which seat the captain and co-pilot should occupy. The co-pilot is just as experienced and capable of flying a plane as the captain. The captain often flies the plane to its destination, and the co-pilot operates it on the way back. Pilots are tested every 6 to 8 months. They use flight simulators and practice all kinds of emergencies. After that, examiners assess them. Safety and technical tests and medical examination also take place regularly. An extra seat in the cockpit behind the pilots is for inspectors who monitor the flight. This seat is also called a jump seat because when you get up from it, it folds up right away. Yep, a lot like movie theater seats. If you're a nervous flyer, pick a seat in the middle of the cabin if possible. Turbulence mostly affects the front and rear parts of the cabin. The middle section, which is over the wings, doesn't get shaken that much. Imagine the plane like a big teeter-totter. Similar principle when it comes to turbulence. Choosing a window seat, you get an opportunity to see how the airplane wings flex and flap. They're designed to move this way. If the wings were stiff, they would snap off once turbulence hit the plane. Well, that's comforting. In most cases, turbulence only drops you a couple of feet down, even though it might feel as if you're falling from the top of the Empire State Building. Woohoo! If the turbulence is strong enough for pilots to ask flight attendants to sit down, the plane can go 10 to 20 feet down. The most extreme white-knuckled turbulence is super rare, but it can make the plane drop 100 feet. So, it's pouring outside when you get on a plane. If you were in a car, you'd simply switch on the windshield wipers and the headlights after turning the key in the ignition. Do pilots do that? Airplanes spark so many questions, and it's time for some answers. Do planes have windshield wipers? Yes, commercial planes do, but they're only used during taxiing, takeoff, and landing. Once a plane reaches its cruising altitude, pilots turn them off. The plane's speed is fast enough to clear the windshields from rain. Wipers might be absent on single-engine airplanes because the propeller airstream blows strong enough to keep the water away. What happens when a plane loses one engine in flight? Actually, it goes, "Hey, has anybody seen my engine? It was just here a second ago." No, nothing special. The plane actually just keeps flying. There are certificates for planes flying over oceans or long distances that state how long they can do it. For example, the Boeing 787 can fly for more than 5 hours without the second engine. It's enough for pilots to plan a safe landing. Well, why is it so cold on a plane? The temperature on board averages 74 degrees Fahrenheit, about the same as in most office buildings. But you feel so cold because your body doesn't move much, producing less heat to warm itself. The crew doesn't turn the heat up because hot air can cause some passengers to faint during the flight. Do airplanes have horns? Yeah, and some of them have a whole trumpet section. Actually, yes, they do have horns, but pilots don't use it to scare away birds or get other aircraft's attention in the sky. "Hey, move over, buddy!" Actually, you can hear that high-pitched chime only on the ground when the plane isn't moving, like when an engineer checks something in the cockpit and wants to get the attention of a ground crew member. Why do planes leave white trails in the sky? It happens when the engine burns fuel. It ejects water and carbon dioxide that gets mixed with the atmosphere, and since the air is cold at high altitude and this exhaust is hot, the water condenses and may freeze, creating those white tails. Do airplanes have brakes? Yes, there are multiple disc brakes made of carbon steel material, similar to the ones in your car. But using them only isn't enough to stop the plane when it touches the ground. The braking system also includes different surfaces that slide out of the wings and disrupt the airflow. Can a plane door open mid-flight? The cabin pressure is the force that won't let that happen. If someone tried to do it, they would have to overcome more than 24,000 pounds of pressure, the weight of a ship anchor. Plus, there are lock bolts deep inside the aircraft structure that hold the door in place. What happens when lightning hits a plane? Now, statistics say this happens to every commercial plane about once a year. But the aircraft's metal parts and lightning protection systems prevent electrical buildup. So, in most cases, this leaves a plane with only a scorch mark on its surface. Why don't the seats and windows always line up? Good question. All commercial planes are designed with seats and windows perfectly aligned. But when an airline buys a jet, it often chooses to add extra seats. More seats mean more passengers and more tickets sold. And less of a view and less legroom for you. See how that works? Why do flight attendants touch the overhead compartment? You'd think that they're checking to see if it's closed tightly. But nope, they use a scalloped handrail hidden at the bottom of the overhead compartment for a steadier walk along the aisle. What are those white spiral marks on engines for? Well, since the ground staff wear hearing protection, they can't rely on their ears to decide if it's safe to approach the plane. Seeing that moving swirl on jet engines prompts them to stay away from the area. Why are there holes in airplane windows? Those windows actually have 3 panes of plexiglass. The tiny hole is in the middle one. It helps regulate the huge pressure difference inside and outside the cabin, so the outer pane can handle the load. If the outer pane happened to break, the middle one, even with a hole in it, would still be enough to keep the window intact. That hole also keeps the windows from fogging up. Why are there hooks on the wings? If there is an emergency landing on water, passengers have to step on the slippery wings to use some emergency exits. That's why crew members secure one end of a rope to the door frame and the other to the wing through the hook. Another rope is secured in the second hole, safely leading passengers along the wing to the inflatable slide. Why do the wings have different colored lights? It's for Christmas. No, that red light on the left wingtip, the green one on the right, and the white one on the tail make up the plane's navigational lights. They let other pilots know the plane's position and the direction it's moving in, toward them or away. Do planes have ignition keys? Well, since ignition keys are usually a security measure, most commercial planes don't need them. They're locked in hangars under 24/7 surveillance. To start the engine, a pilot just pushes buttons and turns switches. But smaller private planes, like a Cessna, have ignition keys to start the engine and even locks on the doors. Why are there triangles above the windows? These black and sometimes red stickers let the crew know which window is best to look out when they want to check the moving parts of the wing. If you get motion sickness during the flight, try to choose a seat between the triangles for a more comfortable trip. How can you get extra space on a plane? Well, if you're lucky enough to get an aisle seat, there's a magic button near the hinge under the armrest closest to the aisle. Press it, and the armrest will swing up to the back of your seat. Why are most planes white? Well, this color reflects the sun better than any other, so it helps keep a plane cool. It's also much easier to spot any cracks, dents, leaks, and other faults on the white surface. And paint makes a plane 1,200 pounds heavier, causing it to burn more fuel. Airlines save money by not painting them. Why don't airplanes have parachutes for passengers? Well, like paint, parachutes would also add extra weight, around 8,000 pounds. Plus, skydivers must go through at least 4 hours of training to learn how to handle a parachute. Lastly, jumping out of a plane at 35,000 feet in the air is simply not safe, because temperatures at that altitude are colder than the Arctic, minus 65 degrees. Why can't planes fly when it's hot? Well, the molecules in hot air are much more spread out. To lift a plane, you need dense air. That's why it gets harder for a plane to take off as the temperature increases. Besides, scorching weather can overheat the internal machinery or even melt some of its parts. So, if it gets 104 degrees Fahrenheit outside, your flight might be delayed. Why do planes have round windows? The very first commercial planes had square ones, but after some time, they started flying at a higher altitude that demanded the cabin be pressurized. Frequent pressurization and depressurization deformed and even broke windows with corners. They were replaced with round ones since they withstand the pressure much better. How do the oxygen masks work? Very well, actually. If the cabin is depressurized at cruising altitude, it loses oxygen. The masks provide that, but only for 15 minutes. It's okay though. That's long enough for the pilot to descend lower than 10,000 feet, where the air has more oxygen and people can breathe normally. What causes turbulence? Your trip gets bumpy because of 3 main reasons: storms, mountains, and jet streams. Just like an ocean, air creates waves when it meets a mountain, and sometimes it has nowhere to go but up in strong currents affecting a plane. Jet streams are bands of swift winds that appear when warm air masses collide with cold ones. Storm clouds push air away, creating unpredictable waves. Why do planes sometimes dump fuel? If there's an emergency landing, pilots must quickly get rid of excess weight, since they didn't burn it, and get to the destination runway as light as they should be. The lighter the plane, the softer it'll touch the ground, so no blown tires or fire. Why are the doors on the left side? Well, the captain usually sits on that side, so aligning the plane with the terminal jet bridge is easier. They fuel the aircraft and load baggage on the right side. If passengers are coming in on the left, it doesn't disturb those crews. Why do they dim the lights during takeoff and landing? It takes your eyes up to 30 minutes to fully adjust to a dark setting. Dimming the lights at night or dusk prepares them in case passengers need to make an emergency exit. They fade the lights during the day to save some engine power. Why are most plane seats blue? This color is psychologically associated with safety and reliability, so flight-weary passengers feel less anxious. Besides, stains and dirt are less visible on blue seats. Now we know! That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
When it's too cold outside, airplanes often get delayed, or in extreme cases, even cancelled altogether. First of all, if it snows heavily, such conditions drastically decrease visibility, making it unsafe to taxi and take off. During a blizzard, flight control may command the aircraft to stay on the ground and wait until the snowstorm subsides. Ice on the runway is another reason. An airplane's landing gear are nothing like a car's wheels, and they can't be equipped with studs to avoid skidding. But even if they were, a plane needs to develop speeds on the ground that are much higher than on an average road to take off successfully. If the runway is slippery with ice, the airplane can slide off it easily. Things like this actually happened in the past. For example, in January 2014, the JFK airport in New York was shut down after a plane skidded off the runway and into the snow. Luckily, no one was injured, but the airport staff had to dig the aircraft out of the snow, and even the local police joined the efforts. Same story with landing, which is even trickier in freezing conditions because a plane is in much less of a controlled environment and traveling at even greater speeds. What's more, while an airplane that's about to take off and skidding will probably get into an open area and stop there, one that's about to land could end up crashing into the airport's infrastructure. Needless to say, that's way more dangerous for everyone. Freezing weather conditions can also cause frost and ice sheets to build up on the plane itself. Airplanes are carefully engineered, and any tampering with their structure may cause huge trouble. As experienced pilots say, even a thin crust of ice over the wings of a plane can mess with their delicate design and destroy lift. Planes can be de-iced though. The airport staff usually spray them with a special solution that doesn't let the ice build up on the aircraft's skin. But back to the runway. If it's covered with ice, there's little you can do. Unless the sun is shining, the chances of safely removing the ice from the pavement are almost zero. There's also a chance of damaging the pavement, making potholes, which can result in safety concerns for both takeoff and landing. Imagine driving over a pothole in a car at full speed. Pretty unpleasant. And now multiply it by about 1,000, because a plane is much heavier than a car, and don't forget that the landing gear is not exactly there for driving. Jet fuel and the equipment that pumps it can freeze too if the temperature is too low. The fuel freezes at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, but that can only happen on the ground before takeoff. At a cruising altitude, temperatures may drop as low as -70 degrees Fahrenheit, but since the liquid is inside the plane and burning down steadily, it's much warmer there. On the ground though, nothing stops the fuel from turning into ice. If that happens, no flights are available, obviously. Same goes for the pumping equipment. Even if the fuel is still liquid, the pump may cover with ice and just stop delivering the fuel into the plane's tanks. In the worst-case scenario, it might even break down, leading to expensive repairs and prolonged delays in flights. Finally, ground crews have to do a lot of work before takeoff or landing, and they're all human after all, so they can't bear the freezing cold for too long. This issue is often resolved by tag teaming. One group of workers goes out in the field to do the job, while the other is waiting for them in a shelter. After 20 minutes or so, the first group returns to warm up, and the second one takes up the job where the first one left it. Although it's efficient, it still slows down the operations a lot, so that might also cause delays. But despite all the trouble freezing weather can cause, it's actually more beneficial for a plane than extreme heat. Cold air is denser than hot, so planes gain more lift and stay truer while in the air. They're more easily controlled in flight too. Air molecules are slower and closer together, creating a steady flow of air around the wings and cockpit. At high altitudes, the air naturally becomes thinner as the air molecules spread out and become more scarce. That's exactly why planes can't get to the upper layers of the atmosphere. There's just not enough air there to create sufficient lift. The same happens when it's too hot down on the ground though. Air molecules get faster and spread out, meaning the plane's wings don't have as much air to push off and get into the flight mode. To take off in extreme heat, a plane has to move much faster to generate enough air resistance and lift. But to move faster, the plane needs its engines to work better, and that's also impossible when it's too hot. As the air gets thinner, the amount of oxygen decreases too. And jet engines use oxygen in the atmosphere for combustion. When they lack this crucial element, they can't convert enough energy into thrust, meaning slower acceleration and worse energy output overall. So the problem is that the plane has to have a longer runway distance to build up enough speed and lift to take off, but it can't because its engines are not working to the best of their ability. This usually doesn't cause trouble, but only up to a point. When the temperatures on the ground level reaches about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, some flights can get cancelled because it's simply dangerous for them to try and take off. Other planes are more heat resistant and powerful, but that also depends on the heat. Some aircraft even have to reduce their weight by removing part of their fuel, cargo, or even passengers when it's too hot. Lighter load means better acceleration before takeoff, and it doesn't help to avoid cancellations, but it also means planes aren't working to their full capacity. The average cruising altitude for an airplane is about 35,000 feet. They don't technically need to be so high up, but that altitude gives the best speed and efficiency. Air gets thinner at higher altitudes, which means less wind resistance, but less lift. For most commercial aircraft, the area between 30,000 and 40,000 feet is the sweet spot where the two factors balance out. You probably still aren't using a laptop from 1999, and your computer isn't flying at close to the speed of sound. Fortunately, planes have a much longer lifespan than computers. There are airliners from the early 1970s that are still just fine. They might not be able to keep up in terms of speed and fuel efficiency, but older planes are no less safe than their modern counterparts. Contrails, those white trails airplanes leave behind them at high altitudes, are easily mistaken for engine exhaust, but most are nothing more than water vapor. During a flight, moisture in the air collects in the engines before being vented with the exhaust. The hot, wet air leaving the engines mixes with the cool, dry air found at high altitudes, resulting in long, thin lines of vapor. Humidity determines when contrails form and how long they remain visible. Ever notice the numbers on the end of a runway? They're actually used to show the pilot which direction the plane is facing. For example, the number 36 is short for a heading of 360 degrees or due north. Along with numbers, the letters R and L indicate if the nearest runway is to the right or left. The lights on the tips of a plane's wings are called position lights or navigation lights, and they're used during times of reduced visibility. They help planes to see each other in the dark and can also tell pilots what direction an aircraft is traveling. The red light marks the tip of the left wing, while the green light is on the right. The third light is white and found on or near the tail. It might seem odd that the flight crew cares whether your window shades are up or down. The main reason is so that the passenger's eyes can adjust to the outside light. Mostly, it's just a matter of getting people on and off quickly. But in an emergency, the last thing they want is people stopping to blink before they evacuate the plane.
Oh boy, you take your seat on the plane and look around. It's a large aircraft, spacious and new. You look up. Something draws your attention to that small compartment above your seat that contains your oxygen mask. come to think of it, you've only ever seen it during the in-flight safety demonstrations. Maybe it's for the better, you think, and relax into your seat. Screaming and powerful jerks are what wake you up. One of the flight attendants is saying something in an urgent voice, but still disoriented after your nap, you can't catch the meaning of the announcement. And then, right in front of your face, you see an oxygen mask. Uh-oh. You place the mask over your face. You did pay attention to the safety demonstration, Then you grip the armrest and close your eyes, trying to calm down, however impossible it sounds. But do you know what's going on inside your oxygen mask? Well, let's talk about it. An oxygen mask deploys automatically in case of loss of cabin pressure. It might happen for several reasons. For example, some problems with the fuselage or malfunctioning of the valves pumping air into the plane. But most of these incidents aren't life-threatening if the masks deploy as they're supposed to. The problem with the air above 10,000 feet is that it contains too little oxygen for people to breathe. That's why, once a plane rises higher than that altitude, the pressurization system springs into action. Its main task is to create the same breathable conditions as at the height of 5,000 to 8,000 feet. Now, if, for some reason, this system fails, oxygen masks drop. If this happens, it's crucial to put your mask on within the first 18 seconds after it deploys. If you procrastinate, you'll feel the effects of hypoxia, low oxygen levels in your blood, very fast. You'll become drowsy, and if you keep ignoring your oxygen mask, you're likely to pass out. Anyway, you acted fast and can now breathe freely. But for how long? And is it really oxygen that you inhale? Well, first of all, you notice with horror that your mask doesn't inflate. No worries, it shouldn't. It's supposed to rise and fall along with your breathing. So everything functions perfectly fine, even if it might seem it's not working. Now, hold on to your hats, here's shocking news. There isn't actually any oxygen in the mask. Instead of the gas, there are several chemicals. When they combine, they mimic good old breathable oxygen. The main reason for using the chemicals is safety issues. This mixture is way less combustible than oxygen tanks. Anyway, the chemical reaction that is happening in a deployed oxygen mask is the reason why you might smell something burning when putting it on. That's the chemicals mixing and forming the new substance. In case of a real fire, your mask simply won't drop. The chemicals inside can, unfortunately, fuel the flames. Oh, and don't forget that in your mask, there's only enough oxygen for 20 minutes at the most. This time is usually enough for the plane to get down to the necessary altitude. When the chemicals in the mask are all used up, the mask stops the flow of air. But by that time, you're already at an altitude where you can breathe without additional help. By the way, oxygen masks are not used too often. On U.S. airlines, it's only been 2,800 cases over a period of 40 years. In other words, additional oxygen was necessary a mere 10 times per 1 billion flight hours. The average cruising altitude of a commercial aircraft is 31,000 to 38,000 feet. Why can't planes climb higher than that? Well, it's not that they can't, they simply don't. Because pilots can't count that high. No, not really. It's because if they did go higher, there would be serious safety issues. First of all, if a plane is flying very high, it takes much more time to get back to a safe altitude. During an emergency, like rapid decompression, when every second counts, it can become a serious issue. Plus, while traveling at altitudes higher than 38,000 feet, planes can't communicate with the ground services as well as they do when flying lower. At lower altitudes, planes can also partially rely on wind, and if they rise too high without any additional support, they waste too much fuel to stay in the air. Once a plane climbs too high, the air can't provide enough lift to keep the machine going. The lift is created by the difference in air pressure, but at high altitudes, this difference is simply not enough. Air may not look like something real because it's nothing material, like metal or plastic. And still, it's one of the things that keeps planes aloft. Let's say a plane is heading for space. Ooh! It has large, cleverly designed wings and super powerful engines. But the higher it goes, the thinner the air becomes until there's hardly any air left. And then nothing can support the plane and help it go further if there is a near vacuum around. That's why we still need rockets to get to space. But back to your flight. The plane is now at a safe altitude and you don't need your oxygen mask anymore. But one interesting detail gets you thinking. Throughout the entire ordeal, you didn't hear the pilots mention the details of the emergency even once. Well, that's because pilots are always very careful with what and how they say. They'll never announce anything dramatic like fail or malfunction. They downplay any existing problem by replacing zero visibility with some fog. Something is broken with some technical problems, and so on. It's called positive scripting. Hey, looks like we've just jettisoned both our wings. Well, that should help us save on weight. Flight attendants are supposed to follow it as well, but passengers perceive pilots' announcements as more important and statistically listen to them attentively 100% of the time. At the same time, if there's a really serious problem you need to be prepared for, you'll definitely get informed. Now, picture this. You enter the passenger cabin of a spacious airplane, and as soon as you find your seat, you realize that for the next several hours, you're going to be crammed in the middle seat between two other human beings. But oh, look! There is a perfectly empty row of seats at the end of the plane. Time to switch places. But what you need to keep in mind is that by doing so, you might endanger the safety of the whole plane. Really? First of all, you aren't likely to be the only person willing to change your seat. But if a couple of passengers do it, they might upset the balance of the aircraft. And since most planes are extremely sensitive to any changes in their center of gravity, it can lead to very unpleasant consequences. Positive scripting again. Pilots must know the distribution of weight on the plane during the takeoff to make special calculations. If these calculations are wrong, there are chances that the aircraft will crash once it tries to leave the ground. Oops. But even if the worst doesn't happen, pilots can still have serious problems with controlling the plane. For example, one pilot almost didn't manage to turn the plane after just 4 passengers had left their assigned seats and moved to the front of the cabin. The situation was critical because the runway was unusually short, and if something had gone wrong, the plane wouldn't have been able to stop. It can also mess with the plane's balance if the airport staff load baggage incorrectly, for example, in the rear compartment instead of the front one. In this case, the machine can pitch up too fast, and the pilot will have a hard time trying not to lose speed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change your seat on the plane at all, but before doing that, ask a cabin crew member if you're allowed to. Still shaky after the fright you've just had, you try to distract yourself. Luckily, you have a window seat and can watch the clouds and wait, you suddenly notice the way the airplane wings are flexing. They seem to flap so much that you get worried they're going to fall off. No worries. The wings are supposed to flex. They're designed this way. If they were stiff, they would snap off as soon as the lightest turbulence hit the plane. By the way, pilots recommend that nervous flyers who are afraid of turbulence should pick seats in the middle of the cabin. Turbulence affects the front and rear parts of the cabin the most. The middle, over the wing section, doesn't shake that much. Maybe you'll feel a bit calmer if you know that airplanes can safely operate with one engine, even during takeoff and landing. And both engines failing at the same time is almost unheard of. But even if something like this happens, a plane won't drop from the sky like a rock. If both engines stop working at a high altitude, pilots still have at least 20 minutes to find a place to land. A plane can land even if its wheels are broken. It does sound scary, but if the landing gear gets stuck, pilots just skid the plane's belly down on the runway. If everything's done correctly, such landings are more or less safe. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to land in our destination, more or less. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Want to catch a glimpse of what flying might look like in the future? Then you're in the right place. Economy class lie-flat bunk beds, vertical flying vehicles, AI-powered in-flight meal service. Buckle up and let's start our flight. But first, I need to ask you, Have you ever heard of the Crystal Cabin Awards? Oh, those are like the Oscars of aviation interior design. And here are some of the most recent winners. Meet Skynest, a lie-flat bed for people traveling in economy class. These nests are supposed to be used on long-haul flights. The design is based on a sleep pod island located in the middle of the plane. And you can book a 4-hour time slot if you want to take a real nap during your flight. The best news is that this design is likely to be introduced next year. While traveling in premium economy on long routes, you'll be able to use smarter seating design. It includes wider seats and twin armrests, which means no more fighting for space with your neighbors. Plus, there will be fully flexible rows with cushions that can be elevated, creating lie-flat beds. Lufthansa Group has promised that premium passengers will be able to book suites with double beds and travel on temperature-controllable heated or cooled seats. As you see, these days, airline companies are working hard on new designs of aircraft cabins, and it might impact the entire future of air travel. At the moment, they focus on travelers' experience within the walls of the plane. As a result, we have some mind-boggling products. Check out Singapore Airlines first-class suites, or Air France's La Première cabin, which is believed to become one of the best first-class cabins in the skies. It's going to feature suites equipped with separate sofas and chairs, and each suite will have 5 windows along the cabin wall. This will make it the longest first-class suite in the world. But then, Airbus went and patented the idea of a more interactive flight experience, especially for those lucky passengers occupying window seats. With the help of special eye-tracking equipment, the aircraft might be able to highlight significant objects you're looking at and provide you with detailed information, appearing on a semi-transparent display on the window. The patent also claims that you could send data to devices connected by Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. This way, takeoffs and landings would get much more exciting, and you'd be able to get information about a new country or city. Qatar Airlines, in turn, came up with the idea of Q suites. It looks like this. On the sides, you have individual suites, while the middle part can be transformed. You can choose to have a double suite to travel together with your partner, or you can have some private space, or even move the walls and turn the place into a quad suite that you can use for a meeting. There might also be some improvements in economy class. They're bound to bring more comfort, especially on a long-haul flight. A company called Zodiac Seats filed a patent based on a zigzag configuration of seats. Look at this aisle, which contains 3 and 4 seats, with each of them facing in the opposite direction. This allows for way more shoulder space than regular seating. Plus, passengers have a lot of leg space. Yes, some people might feel a bit uncomfortable having to face their neighbor for more than 8 hours straight, but aren't these space improvements worth it? Now, you might know that moving around the cabin while flight attendants are serving meals and beverages is kind of tricky. Plus, you have to eat at a specific time with everyone else. Or, if you're not feeling hungry, forego the meal altogether. Well, robots might be the solution. One company has suggested using perfectly sized pods that could slide along the rail in the middle of the aisle, delivering drinks and food ordered by passengers. This way, you could get your meal at the most suitable time for you without leaving your seat. This solution is likely to solve the problems with meal service. Even better, it might allow for fewer galleys in large planes. Unfortunately, this idea was filed 60 years ago and hasn't been implemented yet, so maybe it's not as great as it sounds. Another idea connected with in-flight meal service includes using AI. According to its creators, the technology will record what passengers leave on their trays, and later use this data to suggest various catering plans on subsequent flights. Now, even though these innovations sound like they're going to make traveling way more comfortable, they're not exactly revolutionary. But look at these innovations: vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Hyundai Transys's air taxi cabin concept optimizes space and prioritizes your privacy in a shared cabin. If we talk about short flights, there's City Airbus Next Gen. That's an all-electric, vertical takeoff and landing vehicle with 4 seats based on the lift and cruise concept. It can operate within the range of 50 miles and has a cruise speed of 74 miles per hour. Another amazing prospect is passenger aircraft with AI co-pilots, or even pilots. Some experts claim that planes could potentially be flown on a fully automated basis. Not everyone agrees with this idea, though. A skilled pilot is part of a complicated safety system that reduces risks and keeps passengers safe. Pilots have to be navigators, technicians, engineers, and weather experts. On a regular working day, a pilot needs to deal with ground crew, other air crew, cabin crew, air traffic control, and passengers. That's a lot. And don't forget that they need to communicate well, not only in aviation terms, but also on an interpersonal level. Will AI be able to do the same? Time will tell. But let's get back to the boldest ideas about the future of air travel. Some experts think that sometime around 2040, you'll be able to catch a hypersonic plane ride. Lots of people believe that the era of supersonic planes finished in 2003 when the Concorde commercial airplane was decommissioned after decades of being unprofitable. But it seems the situation might change soon. New supersonic aircraft will fly at incredible heights, and their speed is likely to be at least 6 times the speed of any other passenger plane. Traveling from New York to London, in this case, will take less than 2 hours. By comparison, these days, it takes a conventional airplane 8 hours to fly from one of these cities to the other. There is one problem, though. The supersonic plane tickets will cost a lot, and statistically, people tend to prioritize price over speed. So, experts don't think that a lot of people will be eager to pay a few $1,000s to get from London to Sydney in 4 hours. Plus, such planes will need a lot of liquid hydrogen fuel, and at the moment, it's not cheap. By the way, you might not recognize a plane from 2050. These flying machines will keep changing for the next several decades, and the chances are high that, at some moment, windows will start to disappear from airplanes altogether. This way, aircraft will become stronger and better suited for high speeds. Windows make planes heavier, which results in larger fuel consumption. No wonder cargo planes don't have windows. Planes will also become sleeker and will likely be covered with solar panels. There's also a concept of a plane with its cabin made out of transparent polymers. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd ever board such a plane. Talk about aerophobia. The chances are that in a few decades, we'll see a hypersonic plane with a jet engine that can turn into a rocket, that can fly into space. Liquid oxygen would get injected into the exhaust, turning the engine into a rocket. It would help the aircraft reach enormous speeds, and on the way back, the engine would turn into a regular jet engine once again.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
Most airports are equipped with giant kitchens where the food for passengers is prepared for different airlines at once. Since those oh-so-delightful airplane meals must be cooked about 6 to 10 hours prior to the flight, the kitchens have to work 24/7. Besides, the menu for your flight is developed up to a year in advance. This is a common practice for most airlines because every single ingredient matters and adds to expenses. In fact, American Airlines managed to save $40,000 per year in 1987 after they removed just one olive from every salad they served on their flights. If you have a long layover between flights, going to the nearest hotel to rest might not be the cheapest option. There's a much better trick. Check if the airport or airline sells 24-hour access to the VIP lounge zone. In most cases, you can have free snacks and drinks there, and use free shower cabins and rooms for rest at a very affordable price.
There's an actual term for the first 60 minutes after you check in, the golden hour. It's the time that passengers statistically spend more money in retail and duty-free areas of the airport. And having the most comfortable seats in those areas right in front of the shops is a clever trick to lure you in for shopping. Sitting in a comfy chair while looking at a flashy sign or shopping window can be tempting. If you ever wanted to know what happens to your baggage while you're on board a plane, the short answer is that airport staff don't know once it leaves their territory. And they probably don't really care. Sorry. Baggage is sorted automatically. Scanners scan the barcode and sort the baggage according to its destination. The three main tasks of airport baggage handlers are to move your bags from the check-in area to the gate, to move them from one gate to another when you have a connection, and to move your bags from the plane to the baggage claim area. And that's it. So, if your baggage doesn't move fast enough, it can be late for your connecting flight. Or the exact opposite. Your bag gets to your destination before you do because you're stuck at passport control. Another problem can arise if you forget to tear off any old stickers showing a different destination. In this case, the scanner might send your baggage to the wrong country. You arrive at the airport, already anticipating a couple weeks away from work and all your daily troubles. Park your car in the lot and then find out that it's going to cost you a small fortune to leave your car there. Why so much? In fact, airport parking lots are a business just like any other. The land on which they're built, the construction of the lot itself, the maintenance of the whole thing once it's already in operation, all that costs a handsome amount of money. And somebody's got to pay for it, of course. In addition, parking right next to an airport is simply convenient, which adds to the final cost. If you're not ready to dip into your pocket for a piece of extra comfort, better take a cab. Contrails, those white trails airplanes often leave behind them at high altitudes, are easily mistaken for engine exhaust. But most are nothing more than water vapor. During a flight, moisture in the air collects in the engines before being vented with the exhaust. The hot, wet air leaving the engines mixes with the cool, dry air found at high altitudes, resulting in long, thin lines of vapor. Humidity determines when contrails form and how long they remain visible. If it's already humid up there, then there's more water and the contrail is more prominent. And if it's cold, the droplets might turn into ice, staying behind for a much longer time. If someone were able to open the door mid-flight, they would be immediately pulled out of the plane by a sudden change in air pressure. It could also do serious harm to the aircraft. Fortunately, that's almost impossible. The doors on an airliner open inward while the cabin pressure pushes them out from the inside. The difference between internal and external pressure makes it impossible for the door to open. It might seem odd that the flight crew cares whether your window shades are up or down. The main reason is so that the passenger's eyes can adjust to the outside light. Mostly, it's just a matter of getting people on and off quickly. But in an emergency, the last thing they want is people stopping to blink before they evacuate the plane. Another reason for all the shades to stay up when the airplane is about to take off or land is for the ground crew to see if there's any trouble on board. For example, if there's a fire in the cabin, the ground crew will immediately notice it and act accordingly. If the shades are down, they might lose precious time they would need to rescue the passengers and the airplane crew. Ever notice the numbers on the end of the runway? They're actually used to show the pilot which direction the plane is facing. For example, the number 36 is short for a heading of 360 degrees, or due north. Along with numbers, the letters R and L indicate if the nearest runway is to the right or left. Every commercial airplane you've been on has only one wing. That's right, the left and right wings are actually two parts of a single wing. The first airplanes were called biplanes because they had two wings, one on the top and the other going through the bottom of the fuselage. They were connected with struts and wires, which made a kind of box that basically allowed the aircraft not to fall apart in the air. It was necessary at lower speeds that early planes could only muster. But as the engines increased in power, The second wing became redundant. The single wing still serves as a support for the whole structure though. Looking out the window on the plane's wing, you can see a small yellow double hook on it. It seems strange since it might mess with aerodynamics, but it's there for your safety. In case of an emergency landing, these hooks are used to secure ropes that help passengers exit the plane via the wings. If they're slippery, the rope will help you keep your footing and not fall over while going down. There are several extremely fast streams of air high up in the atmosphere of our planet. Their paths are meandering, but they have a more or less constant flow, allowing passenger aircraft to use them. When an airplane comes close to a jet stream, it may adjust to the direction of its current and fly a lot faster, propelled by the flow. Many airlines use this to their advantage to cut the fuel costs and make air traveling even faster. Clouds, especially thunderheads, can indicate that an area of turbulence is ahead. But sometimes, clear air turbulence occurs when a plane can drop a few feet and start shaking without any warning. It happens when two bodies of air clash at very high speeds. And it's absolutely invisible, so the pilots can't tell when it would happen. The chances of getting into an area of clear air turbulence are higher at low altitudes, over mountain ranges, and near the jet streams. Normally, after it's hit by lightning, an airplane is sent for inspection right after landing, but it can still safely complete its current flight. The fuselage conducts electricity well enough, and like with a lightning rod, the zap will most probably strike one of the tips of the airplane, either one of the wings or the nose. Then it seeks the ground, but doesn't find it, exiting from the tail in the end. It's easier for electricity to roll through the surface of the plane than go inside, so people on board are safe from its effects. Still, lightning is powerful, and there can be some damage done to the airplane on the outside.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
The Himalayas have some of the highest peaks in the world, including Mount Everest. But it's no surprise airplanes find it difficult to navigate the area. But why are commercial airplanes actually banned from flying there? For starters, these mountains have an average height of more than 20,000 feet. Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the entire world, stands at 29,037 feet high above sea level. The area is rough, filled with snow, and has almost no flat surfaces. In case of sudden cabin depressurization, it would be really difficult to perform an emergency landing, since there's literally no flat area there. More so, the low oxygen environment at such an altitude means there's likely to be a lot of turbulence. Not only is it really unpleasant for passengers, but random air movements and high wind velocity means that it's really difficult to maneuver the airplane. This area is also quite low populated, so there's not much there in terms of radar systems. And radar is crucial for aviation safety. Without radars, pilots would be unable to communicate with the ground to figure out flight conditions. It can also get so cold up there that jet fuel might completely freeze. Sure, the fuels used in airplanes usually freeze at around -50 degrees Fahrenheit, but it may be possible above Everest. The lowest temperature was recorded there back in December 2004, when thermometers showed a staggering -44 degrees Fahrenheit. So, no wonder pilots don't want to ever take that risk, especially on a commercial flight. Among the few airports located in the Himalayas, there's one considered to be the most challenging to land in the world. Only 8 pilots on the planet are certified to do it. It's called Paro International Airport, and it's located in Bhutan, a landlocked country in the eastern Himalayas. First, landing there is so dangerous because you're literally flying through some of the world's tallest mountain peaks. Not to mention that those 8 pilots also have to consider strong winds. Despite the challenges, they do manage to safely land over 30,000 people each year. Moving further, there's no radar there to guide the pilots, so they need to maneuver the aircraft entirely in manual mode. The pilots need to track their movements based on specific visual landmark checkpoints as they approach the runway. Moreover, flights are only allowed there during daylight hours and under good visibility. These pilots also need to watch out for utility poles and roofs on the hillsides too. It means they often squeeze their planes between mountain peaks at 45-degree angles before dropping quickly onto the runway. No wonder only 2 airlines fly to Paro International Airport. Apart from these commercial pilots, there are specially trained helicopter rescue pilots who spend most of their career at 20,000 feet in the sky. Most of the time, they partner with equally experienced climbers who train by crossing the Khumbu Icefall. It's dubbed the most dangerous square mile on the planet. Made up of ice pillars as tall as a 6-story building, this huge stretch of the glacier on Everest's western side is filled with bottomless ice holes. It takes between 4 to 12 hours to get from one edge of the icefall to the other, depending on the experience of the climber. You may think it's a pretty serene location since you're literally only surrounded by ice and snow, but these local professionals claim otherwise. One Everest veteran said that the noise was actually the worst part of the job. The mountain produces awful squeaking sounds and sometimes even sighs. It often makes people feel like it's talking to them, warning them about the treacherous environment. Mount Everest isn't the only no-fly zone in the world. Surprisingly, Disney parks are also part of this exclusive club. So you won't ever be able to look out of your plane window and see the beauty of fairy tale castles from up above. In recent years, a lot of crowded tourist attractions, including Disney parks, have increased their security measures to make sure their visitors are as safe as possible. As such, no aircraft is allowed to fly within 3,000 feet of Disneyland in California or Walt Disney World in Florida. It was initially a temporary ban, but this rule became permanent back in 2003. Some other places don't have planes flying over them because of their historical importance, like Machu Picchu, located in the Peruvian Andes Mountains. There's also a large number of rare wildlife species and plants that grow exclusively in this area. It's crucial that they're protected as well as possible. What does it have to do with planes not flying over that area? Firstly, it reduces the volume of harmful chemicals in the area. Secondly, if a plane ever needed to perform an emergency landing in this location, it'd cause irreversible damage to buildings and wildlife. Surprisingly, planes can fly over the Greek Parthenon in Athens, but with one condition: not to get closer than 5,000 feet above it. This way, the historical building is kept a bit more protected from any emergency landings, since there are specially designated areas around it. You won't be able to see the Taj Mahal from above either, since it's one of the most important, oldest, and most beautiful pieces of architecture in the world. It also needs added security features. This building dates back to the 1600s. UNESCO announced it a World Heritage Site in 1983. The Indian authorities set up a no-fly zone above it in 2006. They did it to safeguard not only the building itself, but also the crowds of tourists that come there each year, 7 to 8 million people. Buckingham Palace is well known for being the residence of British monarchs. So, for the Queen's security, a no-fly zone was set up here too. Planes aren't allowed to fly over Windsor Castle either, to make sure the royal family is equally protected. Other important British buildings with no-fly zones include Number 10 Downing Street, the British Prime Minister's official residence and office, and the Houses of Parliament. George Washington's home in Mount Vernon, Virginia, can only have planes flying above it at more than 1,500 feet. The historical wooden mansion was built for President George Washington between 1758 and 1778. Unfortunately, the building has seen a lot of damage over the years, so in an effort to preserve it better, authorities decided to prohibit vibrations produced by flying aircraft. That's why another no-fly zone was established there. It covers the airspace above this National Historic Landmark. That's probably the reason why you'll rarely see pictures of this house from above. Since it's the residence of the US President, it's not allowed to fly over Washington, D.C. It's also the home of Congress and other establishments. So, the authorities set a special flight rules area, stretching for 30 miles around Ronald Reagan International Airport. This means that it's one of the airports with the most precise takeoffs and landings. Pilots have to carefully tackle no-fly zones, which sometimes results in uncomfortable takeoffs for passengers. Whenever a pilot breaks a no-fly zone, it's a big problem. like the one that happened back in 2005 when a pilot accidentally steered the plane into a prohibited zone. The capital had to be evacuated immediately, and their regular activities were interrupted. Other capitals of the world have similar requirements, like Budapest, for example. In the capital city of Hungary, planes aren't allowed to fly over the ancient inner city of Pest and the Buda Hills. Almost all air traffic is generally prohibited above Paris too, with some exceptions. Aircrafts flying no lower than 6,500 feet. Flying helicopters are also a big no-no within the city limits. Only certain choppers undertaking precise missions can get special authorization. Generally, passenger planes aren't allowed near the island of Manhattan either, partly because of the really tall buildings there and the added risk of collision, but mostly because all three major New York airports, John F. Kennedy International Airport, Newark Liberty International Airport, and LaGuardia Airport are very close to each other, so the air traffic in the area has to be really well thought out to make sure the planes don't cross paths.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.
It seems strange that a commercial jet doesn't have keys to turn it on, but it's a bit more complicated than just turning a key. Instead, there's a series of buttons and dials on the control board that starts the complicated process. A battery provides the power to the aircraft that is charged through a small electric generator within the jet's tail. Airflow gets in and moves into the jet's engines to keep them cool. A reserve power then warms the turbines by turning them slowly until they start spinning at the right rate. Then, the engines can be turned on, one at a time. With up to 4 engines on a commercial jet, this entire process can take up to 90 minutes. Planes don't have keys to lock the doors either, but when they sit idle, jets have security guards constantly monitoring them. But even if someone happened to get past them, it wouldn't be a quick getaway. When you enter the plane, the captain keeps a close eye on the boarding process. They are not only in command of the flight deck, but also of the passenger's cabin. To become a commercial pilot, you gotta have a distance vision of at least 20/20. But depending on the airline, it's sometimes okay if your perfect vision is assisted with glasses. It's time to find a seat on the plane. You checked in late, and you've already had an unpleasant experience of not getting on your flight like that in the past. This is because airlines purposely overbook their flights, just in case there are no-shows or cancellations. So, you didn't get to choose your seat this time. You walk past the front seats in jealousy. There are seats that are always taken much faster because everyone wants to leave the plane as soon as possible after it lands. But if you're choosing safety over early departure, the back is the place to be. It's estimated to be 40% safer in the rear end of the plane. Maybe you'd prefer to drive instead of flying? The chances of something dangerous happening to a plane during a flight are 1 in 11 million. Compare it to the likelihood of a car accident, which is 1 in 5,000. You've been placed at the emergency exit. Excellent, more legroom. Over the past 30 years, legroom has been decreasing more with every year, up to 5 inches on some airlines. No, you haven't been getting taller. The reason behind this is the more people they're able to fit in, the more money the airline makes. Airlines don't build their own aircraft and use factory-made planes. From there, each airline will determine its own seating structure. This is also why the seats don't line up with the windows. But it doesn't matter, you have the best seat, although it's always a bit concerning when sitting next to an emergency door. What if you accidentally knocked it while asleep and opened it? Relax, it's actually impossible to open these doors while flying. The air pressure inside pushes against every square inch of the cabin. On the door itself, this pressure equates to 1,000 pounds across every square foot of the door. But even if you somehow developed Hulk-like strength in your sleep, you still wouldn't be able to open it as there's a series of electrical and mechanical devices that latch it closed. The extra measures are important as the moment the door opens, the entire cabin temperature would quickly drop, and that drastic change in pressure would weaken the plane's structure. It's time for takeoff, and they've asked you to turn your phone off. Should you really? 10% of people have admitted that they don't turn theirs off and don't even set them to airplane mode. Cell phones can cause issues. but they don't disrupt the electronics as you might believe. There is a genuine concern that while you're flying in the air, your phone can receive signals from multiple towers on the ground, providing stronger distractions for the pilots. So let's make their job a little easier and turn it off. The plane has reached 40,000 feet, your ears have popped, and the seatbelt sign is turned off. The flight attendant walks down the aisle with their arms held outward. Within such a thin passage, they walk this way as it helps with their balance. They try to avoid disrupting passengers, so they don't use the headrest of the seats. And in case of sudden turbulence, there are special grabbing spots under the overhead luggage bay. It's estimated that 500,000 people are flying in the sky at any given time. So right now, you're part of that special group involving 0.1% of the world's population. You look out the window and notice the white wings. Planes are painted white and other lighter colors as well to help reflect solar radiation. This avoids damage from the sun by reducing the amount of heat the plane receives.
We'll be experiencing some turbulence.
But further in the distance, dark clouds approach and the plane is heading towards a thunderstorm. Since it's made of metal, it has to be a big electric conductor, right? Thankfully, jets are fitted with an aluminum shell that conducts electricity very well. The cabin's interior is completely shielded from lightning, protecting electrical systems and leaving us carbon-based mammals unhurt. A plane is so perfectly built for electrical storms that it's one of the safest places to be. There haven't been any major incidents from a storm since the 1960s. You're thirsty and you're aware that you should have brought your own water. When aircrafts land at each location, they refill their water supplies. The water quality in a plane is based on where they collected the vital liquid. Many things contribute to the water quality of every airport. Water cabinets, trucks, carts, and hoses all could be of different standards. In 2019, an airline water study found that most airlines weren't providing clean water, so the general recommendation is to only drink water from a sealed bottle and avoid even tea. But the food is perfectly fine. As you sit back down, you notice the cabin is cold. Super cold, to be honest. It's intentionally set to around 71 degrees Fahrenheit for a good reason. When people become vulnerable to fainting, it's due to not receiving enough oxygen. And when there's warm air mixed with high cabin pressure, fainting becomes more common. So, while the cold air is helping those who need it, you've been provided with a blanket for your comfort. Warmed up with a blanket, you notice the dry air running through your nose, and it dehydrates your lips and eyes. But don't worry, the air is completely safe and very clean. 40% of the air is recycled and goes through a thorough cleaning system to remove all dust and airborne bacteria, and the other 60% comes from the outside. The humidity levels in the air get very low, and that's why you feel all that discomfort. It's now dark outside as the plane begins its descent to land, and the lights are dimmed. The dimmed lights aren't for the pilots or crew or those at the airport. They're for you. If something goes wrong while landing when it's dark, they'll have to start an emergency procedure. The dimmed lights are there to help your eyes adjust and help you follow towards the exit in the dark easier. But luckily, today, it won't be necessary, as your journey has come to an end.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side. That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.